Nice cup of coffee. I got a belly full of food this morning, so now I'm ready to go to sleep. What is with food comas? I don't get it. Anyway, today's live stream is going to be talking about prepping for the holidays. And that might seem obvious to some of you, but there's a lot of things to take into mind, or keep in mind, as you prepare for everyone coming to your home. And so I want to talk about that. I've got a few other things to discuss with you as well. Thank you for letting me know the sound is good. Appreciate that, Tyler. So we've had some really interesting topics happen this week. And it's been, there's been ups and there's been downs. The biggest news this week is that Mindstream is essentially no more. And there was rumors circling. There was a lot of questions about this last week. And this week, or actually I think it was yesterday, some emails started being sent out from the CEO of Mindstream to customers directly. So I read one of those. It was shared in Club Milo's Reef. And they basically stated that they just could not keep up with demand. They stopped taking orders because they didn't want people waiting even longer. And by stopping taking orders, they stopped money coming in, which ended up making them cash poor to the point where they had to lay off people. And then after the people were laid off, they couldn't figure out any way to get back on track. I feel like they're trying to sell their technology to another company that can continue the idea of the Mindstream in its current state or in a better state, you know, some other type of scenario. So there's a chance that that's still floating out there in the world, but whether it comes to fruition, nobody knows. So at this point myself, I've unplugged my Mindstream because it stopped measuring. What a strange coincidence, right? And it's just sad it didn't work out, and it's upsetting for anyone that spent the money. Anyone that bought one of these in the last, let's say in the last year, is now no longer able to even connect it to the web. Well, I mean, essentially can no longer connect it to the web, cannot get replacement discs, which you have to replace each month. It's just, it's ugly. So there are people that are very upset about this, and they are rightly so. So will something come of this? I don't know. I mean, I'm very optimistic, you know, in general, and I always hope for the best. And the fact they didn't say, we're done, we're gone, bye-bye, just like that. Instead, they were saying we're still trying to get our technology out there to where someone else can grow it. Gives me that little tiny bit of hope. So that's kind of that. There was a post in Club Milo's Reef that I hope I can find for you really quick, because it was really good. Actually, I just want to read it. Let's see if I can find it. So, alrighty, I think I found it. All right, so, you know, every Saturday I tell you guys, we got to test our water. And every Saturday, some of you do, many of you don't, because of stubbornness, I'm sure. But it's really important. I mean, I would love to think that you get the reminder, and like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And, you know, 6,000 of you immediately test your water. But that's being a little overly ambitious. So anyway, this write-up matches very well with what I was describing. And if anything, tells you even more about what, why it's so important to measure your water. It's really easy to get lazy. It's super easy to say, oh, everything in the tank looks fine, so obviously the water's fine. And while that might be nice, there are times where things are not right and the corals have just not quite hit their tipping point. And at that point, you're playing catch up, or you're trying to stop a domino effect, and you're already too far beyond the behind the 8 ball that you just can't win. So let me just read this to you really quick. It's not very long. Does anyone else actually enjoy frequent testing? If so, what do you test and how often? Testing everything weekly, as Mark suggests, is great advice, but I feel that is the absolute minimum. Careful note-taking and frequent testing gives you a much better pulse on what's going on with the tank, especially when you make any changes to lighting, flow, or try out new additives. A fast-growing reef can have rapidly evolving parameters, and many issues can be predicted and mitigated with a set of testing routine catered to your tank. The hobby is rapidly evolving, and these automatic testers are the future, but I'm waiting a few years for the kinks to iron out. Nothing can replace a good old-fashioned test kit. And then Mike goes on to say, I test alkalinity daily. It's cheap, easy, and can be done in 45 seconds with a Saltwater kit. Second to temperature, it's the most important parameter to watch. And I agree, we care about tank temperature at all times, and alkalinity is a really, really important one. I test nitrate and phosphate every other day with a Red Sea Pro algae control kit. I feel these parameters are very important to watch in low nutrient tanks or when any bacterial additives like Live Rock Enhance, Vibrant, or Microbacter 7 are dosed. Algae blooms, die-off, alkalinity swings, and coral health and growth are very closely tied to these parameters. Calcium is important, but nowhere near as much as the others. As long as it's dosed equally with your alkalinity, I find it'll rarely budge. I test every 5 to 7 days with Saltwater. And I'd agree, calcium seems to never move in my tank. It's always right around 400. Magnesium is like calcium, but even less important as it's used up at about a tenth of the rate. I test it every week with Saltwater, and a 10% water change is enough to keep it up. So Mike doesn't even have to even dose magnesium. I'm actually dosing, as I mentioned to you guys last week. Salinity is very important, but the tank rarely needs testing as it's not depleted by coral growth. It will slowly rise with large additions of 2-part, so monthly precision testing and adjustments is enough. Water should always be tested if not mixed with accurately weighed salt. After using a precision glass hydrometer, I wouldn't use anything else. I know my tank is exactly 1.0264 specific gravity, and the device is dead on accurate after using a precision weighed reference solution. Temperature is the most important parameter to monitor and control. I use a few cheap digital thermometers to periodically calibrate my Apex probes. The main Apex has a display and sump probe. My backup Apex Junior monitors the display and powers an emergency heater should the GFCI trip, the heater, or the Apex fail. So he's got a backup in place. And that was it. Mike, I thought that was really well written. And I mean, I put a big heart on it. So, that's even better than a like, right? And seriously, I thought that was such good advice, in order of which is most important. So alkaline and temperature were number one. Of course, we all care about nitrate and phosphate. Then he says, then calcium, then magnesium, and of course, stay on top of your salinity. If you're doing automatic water changes, please even more so stay on top of your salinity, checking it once a week. And like Mike was saying, he loves his, I'd say, scientific grade glass hydrometer. Myself, I use abundance of different tools. I like the digital refractometer. I've had it for a long time. I also have a couple of regular look-through refractometers. And it's really important that we stay on top of these numbers. And I'm not going to keep harping on it. I feel like I've said what I had to say on that topic. Real quick, I'm going to throw this on the screen because it's the next most important topic of my life. And that is we are 26 orders to go. So anything, let me move this off my face. I'll get over here, I'll get over here. All right, so anything that is being sold in my shop right now during the rest of December, anyone that places an order will get an opportunity to either win the Coral View lens clip that goes on your phone, or they can win the Comore X1 dosing pump. So I've put those up as a prize. We have to hit 1,000 orders for the year, and I'm really, really close. As I said, 26 orders to go as of right this minute. And so anything that you place an order for, whatever that may be, small or big, it counts as toward the contest, and it helps me hit this crazy goal that I've set for myself that has no bearing on life whatsoever, other than makes me happy. I did just add this to my website. So this is F-Aptasia. Yes, it stands for exactly what you think it does, and it's to get rid of aptasia. So this is on my website now, and this is the large bottle. I didn't want to sell the small one. I want to sell a big one so you can just use it and take care of stuff, and if you need it later, you still have more left. So the F-Aptasia is available for $25 on my website plus shipping, which is about $6. And then I also want to remind you guys, of course, that Live Rock Enhance is a super duper product that really makes your rock work look cleaner. And so I would like to recommend that you buy that as a stocking stuffer for yourself. And again, that's another item I can ship for $6. So when you're on the website, if the, well, I know the shipping will be higher. I just refund the difference. I spend a lot of time refunding people a little bit of their shipping rate because the website won't let me just pick a nice low number that will work exactly in the right situation, but not in the wrong situation. So this is my workaround, more manual labor. All right. There was a third topic. Oh, yes. So this was a big one for me yesterday. I was like reading this post and I was really stunned by the responses to the question. The question of the person was, I have a 180-gallon reef, and I want to get heaters for it, and I wanted to know if I need. I think they said, man, I hate paraphrasing, but I think they said, do I need two 500-watt heaters? And my head kind of exploded. I was like, 500 watts each? Two of them for a 180? Are you kidding me? All right, so let's dial back my extreme shock for just a second here. I have a 400-gallon reef with a 60-gallon anemone cube, which comes out to about 450 gallons of water. So more than double what this person has. And I have three 300-watt heaters. That's 900 watts for 450 gallons of water. Why would anyone need 1,000 watts of heat for their tanks? Now, I have not watched the video yet by BRS, but I think that's where this all started. I think that's where everyone started going, oh, yes, I want to buy these. Because I did just a cursory amount of searching and saw that there were heaters being sold on the market that were 300 watt and 500 watt, and people were buying them in pairs because they felt it was safer. Well, safer how? I mean, we definitely do want two heaters, and we want the two of them combined to be the amount of wattage your tank needs. The rule of thumb nationwide, and I'm going to assume globally, but I'm sure someone in Iceland, is it Iceland or Greenland that's really frozen? I'm thinking somewhere that's really frozen, they may have a higher rule, but generally speaking, 3 watts per gallon is how much heat you need to maintain your tank's temperature for reef inhabitants. So if you're trying to keep your tank at 76 degrees and your house isn't 40 degrees, 3 watts of heat is going to be able to do it. If you keep your house at something comfortable like I do, 71 degrees, it doesn't take much for my tank to get the temperature it needs to be and stay there. So here was my part that kind of made me think, really? Because everyone always seems to worry about how much power their equipment uses. If you get a skimmer, well, how many watts does it pull? If you get a return pump, well, how many watts does that use? If you get a gyre or a Vortec or something like that, well, how many watts is it burning? And even LEDs. Well, with LEDs, I'm saving electricity because I'm not using as much power. So everyone cares about those watts. But then they just throw out the word 500 and 1,000 watts like no big deal. That's a huge amount of power. 1,000 watts is 10 amps. I mean, if you have a 15 amp breaker for your aquarium and you have two 500 watt heaters that come on, what do you think is going to happen to that breaker? It's going to trip. I just... Oh. All right. I'm getting too riled up. All right. So, calmly and collectively, a 180-gallon tank at 3 watts per gallon is 540 watts. So a 500-watt heater would do that entire tank. Personally, if it was me, I'd probably have two 250s. That gives me 500 watts. If you were not able to keep up, I could see a person saying, I need two 300s, because that'll get you 600 watts. And the idea between two heaters versus one is that if one were to stick in the on position, it doesn't have enough wattage to cook your tank. But if both of them stick on at the same time, there is that potential. In my tank, I have 3 heaters intentionally, so if one sticks on, the other 2 can't. The odds of all 3 being stuck on at the exact same time and going beyond the limits of what my apex is set is infinitesimal. It's just, there's no chance of that ever happening. I actually have the heaters set to where they are 1 degree hotter than the apex allows. So even if the apex gave it power, about 1 more degree up, they're going to turn themselves off because they have an internal thermometer as well, or a thermostat. So we only need as much wattage as what the tank needs, and to go with a bigger number does not save you money, it doesn't help anything, and there's a huge risk that you'll cook your tank. So I don't know. The reason I said BRS is because I believe I saw them selling 300 watt and 500 watt heaters only and no other choices. So I think maybe that's why people are thinking, well, I need to get those, and get the ones that match your tank. That's my big spiel, and don't overcook your tank. I don't want to read posts like, oh my God, my tank's 95 degrees, something went wrong. And I realize, we are buying heaters, like in this case, the one I'm talking about includes a controller. So in theory, there shouldn't be anything bad that's going to happen, but it's still too much power to come on at the same time as everything else on your tank. And it's going to end up tripping breakers at the minimum. So I don't recommend that. I'm never a proponent of overkill. I'm always recommending use the right amount and be you know, plan it properly. You know, get the right size skimmer, get the right size pump, use the right amount of sand. You know, these are the things that we do. And to go overkill sounds like overkill, and it could even lead to killing. So I definitely want to ask you guys to please think about wattage consumption as well as what does your tank need when you're buying a heater. Heaters don't last forever. I'm sure I've done a live stream on heaters already, so I'm going to just reiterate a few facts. There are titanium heaters out there. There are glass heaters out there. There's even some that are made of polycarbonate, which is basically plastic, that you can just keep hitting and they won't break. I remember at one of the Machinas, the guy kept tapping it on the table, and he kept tapping it. And you know, you're just trying to have a conversation. There's this tack, tack, tack. I'm like, what is this? What is he doing? And he's like, see, it won't break. And he had to demonstrate it like 10 million times during Machina. Kind of was annoying for those that were near him. But anyway, heaters need to be fully submerged. We don't want parts of it exposed to air, especially during a water change. You want to make sure that they work. You want to, you know, from time to time, you're going to look at them and see if the light came on, or you have to grab it and hold it in your hand underwater and see if you're feeling the warmth off of it. Heaters don't get so hot that they burn you alive, so don't fear that. If your tank temperature isn't coming up for some reason, definitely start checking your heaters and see what's going on. It could be something as simple as it came unplugged, or it's a little loose in the plug and needs to be pushed all the way in. But occasionally they can be broken. And when they do, they can cause chaos in our tank. So you need to visually inspect and keep things clean so you can make sure that all is well. There's other heaters on the market that you can use, and there's other controllers on the market that you can use. The old days, a lot of people relied on the Renko controller, which was like this large thing you hung on the wall. That kind of reminds me of those things they put in bathrooms that makes it smell pretty. It was that big. And you'd hook that up, and then it would measure your tank, and it would enable or disable the item plugged in, which could have been a chiller, or it could have been a heater, or both. So that was a big controller. Obviously, the Apex can control things, and that's how I run my tank. My Apex is set to turn on if it gets below 77, which would be 76.9, and then they will turn off at 78.5. So I'm only going up about 1.5 degrees, and then that's it, and it lets it taper back down, which usually my heaters come on at night. All day long, I kind of have some free heat from the metal halides, so to speak, so I don't have to worry about that. But you want to make sure your heaters are working and that they are not super old. You know, if you've had one for 5 or 6 years, definitely look at replacing it because they don't last forever. And if you can plug a heater into a controller, that's always best. Some kind of controller is ideal. I think that's why a lot of people are embracing the Inkbird because it has that built-in controller. But I don't feel like you need to have the Inkbird plugged into your Apex to control your heaters. I think that's too much control. There's too many things going on. There's what I would consider in this point a point of failure because you have triple redundancy. It's just too high up. So if you're going to use the Inkbird, plug in the wall, let it do your heat. Let's you know, hope that they do a great job with their probes, so that way you don't have any surprises. And if you're using just a regular glass heater like Ebo Jaeger is what I use, there's Eheim Jaeger, there's Aqueon, there's Phoenix. I mean, there's so many brands. You definitely want to plug it into some kind of a controller. Matter of fact, I believe some titanium heaters are literally a heater with a cord and nothing else, and they must be plugged into a controller or you can't even use them because they're designed to be on. And that's the other thing. The heaters, they come on and they turn off. They don't ramp up, they don't ramp down, they're not adjustable in power usage. They are on or off. And so when you plug in the heater, it's on, it pulls a certain amount of wattage. If you own a kilowatt, you can plug the heater into that, and you can actually read the wattage being used, and you can see if the heater is working properly. That's another good way to inspect one, just see if it works. If you have a 100-watt heater, you should say 100 watts in your kilowatt, 101, 102, 98, something like that. But if it says 4, the heater needs to be replaced. All right. So that's kind of my, man, I got through my topics really quick today. I apologize. I thought this would drag out longer. But let's start answering some of your questions. I mean, that is one of the reasons you guys tune in every single week. While I'm waiting for your questions, I'll catch up on a couple other things. My reef is doing great. It's really pretty. But I'm starting to wonder if maybe my copper band is nipping at my LPS because my blastos just aren't fluffy. I feel like there's an acan polyp missing. I've been watching a pink hammer a head would come off and then another head, and I'm like, what is happening? I'm just blaming that fish because I don't know who else to blame, but I'm just kind of watching things. I'm not sure what's going on. But I would love to correct whatever is kind of changing in my tank. And water parameters, I did all my tests a couple days ago, so I'm a little bit early for you guys. And my reef still is a little bit low in salinity. It's probably about 1.024. It's 32.8 ppt, so I need to bring that up. Temperature was 78.3, pH was 8.02, ORP 330. Calcium measured 400, like I said. Alkalinity was 9, DKH. Phosphates were crazy high, 0.75, and magnesium was 1300. So I dosed Phosphate RX to bring it down. I'll remeasure today and see where we're at. I also decided to finally test the frag tank that I've been ignoring. It literally is just on life support. I give it so little time a day, it's ridiculous. And salinity was 33.8. Phosphates were 2.0. Alkalinity was 8. Calcium, well, I'll save calcium. Magnesium was 1400, pH was 8.08, and temperature was 77.7. Calcium was 900 ppm. So I told you that tank needs a reset. I am going to drain it. I'm going to reset it with new plumbing. I'm going to remove the substrate, add a frag tray in the front, even though I hate it, put the rocks behind, fix the light that's not working, and get some new water in that tank. That would help immensely on what's going on in that poor tank, those animals. In the meantime, I stopped the calcium doser, so no more calcium's going in, because clearly there's more than enough. It's crazy high. So I was just looking at that test, I was like, wow, I can't wait to talk about this on the live stream. But so, you know, I've been ignoring that tank. I mean, not even testing it. I just feed it every day. That's all I do. And so it's kind of a mess. But I knew it was a mess. That's why I don't show it to you. It's just ugly. So videos wise, I haven't had any time. This whole week I've been promoting buying things on Milo's Reef. And because of that, put that right there, I've been asking everyone to please buy things for my website so that I can make this goal of 1,000 sales in 2019. And while I was doing that, it was pretty much taking up all my time, because not only was I receiving orders, I was filling orders as quickly as I could too. And I feel like I shipped out like 70 orders this week, which is a lot of work for one guy. And so because of that, I haven't had any time to sit down and edit, which I wanted to do. I wanted to edit the 6-year anniversary video. I wanted to edit some of Dubai. I wanted to edit some of the LFS tour that I did with DFW Mass the week before Dubai. I've got all these videos. I need some time to edit. So we'll see what I can accomplish tomorrow, because I definitely want to get something out, and I think I really want to get the 6-year video out first. So I think they'll do that one. Also, I met with my doctor yesterday, and now this is my primary doctor, not this surgeon. And I explained what was going on. But you know what? I think I need to answer that door, because that's a guy in a vest. All right, let me make sure that the sound still works. I had to unplug for a second. He was wearing one of those orange vests, like it's a guy that works on the streets or the city or the the water. So I thought I'd better answer that in case they're asking me to move my car or something. And what it was a package from Amazon. And it actually lines up perfectly with the conversation we're having. These are more labels for my printer that prints the labels that go on your boxes that get shipped. I ran out last night, got a new box today. So I'm ready for Monday, which is perfect. Okay, so back to the doctor thing. Let me turn this off. I told her what was going on. I was kind of updating her on everything because I feel like I barely speak to her. When I call the doctor's office, there's like this fortress of people that stand between me and my doctor. And no matter what I ask, I never really believe she's answering me. I feel like it's them with their own opinions. It drives me nuts. So I got to ask her a lot of questions and see what was going on. And she also has put me on another medication to help lessen the pain level in my body. So it's not a painkiller. It's some kind of a... I can't remember the name of it. Of course, Purigen comes to mind, but that's for aquariums. But there's this product that this pill you take once a day, and it's supposed to like stop the nerve endings from hurting or sending the signal. I think it's something with a P, but I can't remember the name of it. Prednisone? No, that can't be right. It's something else. But so anyway, I picked that up yesterday and took one last night. And so I am just like, as you guys know, I can't do the surgery yet. So for now, it's just pain management and working on myself and just kind of exercises. One person contacted me on Facebook and told me about a specific exercise that's out there that's like it's a 5-letter name that I can't remember whatsoever, that is sort of like a high-intensity yoga that helps space out your vertebra, you know, just make you stretch them out to create some space for healing. And I looked up to see if there's anyone in my area that does this, and there was a place in Dallas. So I'm going to see about possibly looking into that. I've had a lot of people recommend acupuncture. I just feel like that's pointless, but maybe I'll try it too. Why should I be so stubborn and say no? Who knows? But I do know there's physical defects within my spine that have to be fixed by a surgeon at some point. So anything else is just helping me get by for now until I get to that point where I have to go in. And I need the insurance company to say yes. That's the other part. So that was really disappointing, and I'm over it. You know, it's like, it is what it is. I can't do anything about it. I'm just going to move on with my life, and I'm going to address it again next year. So that is that. Alrighty, now let me get to your questions. Looking for a question. Oh, how much is F-Aptasia? $25, and this is a 2-ounce bottle. So there's a lot in there. Let's just open this up, show you what's in there. So you've got a wooden paddle. You've got the syringe. This is the bottle of F-Aptasia. And see, when I flip it over, I don't know if you can make that out, but there's like sludge on one side. That's why I use the paddle to really stir it. And once you've really stirred it, then you shake it. And there's also a couple of different tips. This one here I'm putting in front of my shirt so you can see. So it's got like a bent tip, and then here's a straight tip. So you have different ways to get at ones that are under the rocks versus hitting one from above that's easy. So yes, that is what's in that box. Okay. Dave asked the question, how long does an average tank last? I know they don't last forever, and when do they recommend replacing or upgrading before the failure of the seals happens? Yeah. You just never know. That's the problem. There are guys out there that have an aquarium that is 15, 20 years old, and it's fine. It's still holding water. It's amazing. It's a miracle to me. I consider silicone and glass to be some kind of black magic. You know, I love it when it holds, but I've had several tanks over the years just start leaking. One was just shy of 6 years old, and it started dripping from the top corner and just started dripping down the woodwork, and my carpet was wet right here. And that tank was taken down as quickly as possible before the glass let go, and then it was replaced with a 400. And the 400 that I put in that place was put in 2011, and 13 months later, that brand new tank sprung a leak. And it had to be shipped back to be completely rebuilt, and that took forever. And that's this tank. So the one behind me is the brand new one that replaced the one that leaked, and this one has lasted 6 years. You know, mentally, I'd like to hope they'd last about 10 years. And there was a guy that was contacting me at one point years ago, and he said, hey, I want to, I think he said the aquarium was in like a dentist office. He said, my boss wants me to move the tank into a different room, and we're going to build it into the wall, and we want to do all the stuff. And so what do you think about that? And the first thought I said was, how old is this tank? And he said it was 20 years old. And I just said, haven't you got your money's worth out of that one? Get a brand new one with a warranty. So I feel like something that's held water that long, that's great. Congratulations. but I would not take a 20-year-old used tank that's holding water and install it in a new spot and reset it with new stuff and expect it to last another 5 or 10 or 15 years. I just wouldn't. That's me. You know, I don't have that kind of faith in silicone. Geoff says, do you ship to Australia? I sure do. Anytime somebody wants something, I just need to know what you want and how many of it you want and your postal code, and I can check the price of shipping and then send you that, that amount and see if you agree to it. And if you like it, I can send an invoice and take your order. Look, here's one right here. Reef Keeper says, my 58 gallon is 26 years old. Oh my God, that's insane. Well done, sir. Well done. Wow. Macy says, or Macy's daddy says, can you use Reef Enhance with Vibrant? Well, Reef Enhance is a type of a food, and so that should be okay with Vibrant. Live Rock Enhance, in case you meant that one, sometimes people mix those up. That one I probably would not use in conjunction with Vibrant. I like to take one thing in my tank at a time and then give the tank a couple of weeks to get off of that before I go to the next item that I put in. That way I'm not throwing so many different things into the tank at once. It makes it harder to figure out what's going wrong when you've got everything added at one time. Oh, and I still have to get into my main topic that's on this live stream. So I knew I had something else to talk about. I was like, how am I done? Let me answer a couple more questions. Jay's Crazy Obsession says, how long do tanks go without a reset? Usually the reason we reset is because the coral growth has gotten so large, so dense, or the problems are so insurmountable, you just have to reset. I typically don't do resets. I set up a tank and I enjoy it. But I guess what I did 2 years ago where I took out a massive amount of coral would be considered by some to be a reset. It was definitely a cleansing. And we just worked on the top half of the reef, removed all of that to open it all up again, and planted some new little corals, which are now larger. So that has obviously worked well. But a full reset, you know, is basically like I'm talking about my frag system. I'm just going to drain it, remove the substrate, pull the rock out, drill new hole for the plumbing for the drain, because I want an emergency drain on that tank now. And I'm going to then reset it with new sand, new rock, new water, and get it going again. And hopefully grow some frags. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. That's awesome. So 25 to go. Art, I don't know why you're always driving when I go live. Where are you going? Why can't you stay home? Praveen says, how can I safely frag a zoa from the rock? I have one type of zoa that's taking over the rock, leaving no room for others. Well, if you can get like a utility knife blade, you know, like one of these guys, and get under the zoa and actually under that little bit of coralline or the top layer of the rock and chip off that so the zoa plops off, then you can plant that with a little bit of glue on its foot on a new frag plug and put it somewhere else. And the reason you go under the rock rather than just trying to slice it off, if you slice a zoa, you kill it. It needs the foot. So if you can get under the foot and just take off a little tiny bit of the strata that is on the rock, that would be the best solution in that situation. If you can't use a razor blade for some reason, coral or bone cutters can really go in there and kind of chisel into the rock and chip out a little tiny nugget of rock with the zoa on there. You can move it elsewhere. Alrighty. Andre says, what's in the box? I love it. See, I hate the delays on live stream. It makes it hard for me to keep up with the latest joke. Garrett says, I have a green hair algae issue. I cut down on feeding now to every other day. I heard keeping magnesium closer to 1400 will help that, along with granular ferric oxide and carbon. And what are my thoughts? My thoughts are you should watch my GHA video, because what you need to do is knock down the phosphates, then you need to rip out everything you can manually, and then you need to add a cleanup crew. But that's what the video talks about. And to stop feeding your tank or feeding it less, I'm against that. I'm all about feed your fish. I mean, I've always been that way. I like fat, healthy fish, and to cut back on food because I'm worried about algae is the wrong approach for me. So I use Phosphate RX. I bring the phosphates down. I don't worry about GFO. I haven't used GFO in forever. And that video will help you immensely, I think, in getting this solved. If that doesn't work, you can use Reef Flux, which or Flux RX. Either one is on my website. And that one will pull down, it'll actually kill off that algae over a period of a few weeks. And then you'll have a prettier tank. But I kind of like to see you go back to feeding your tank daily. Your fish shouldn't have to wait so long between meals. Matter of fact, I was thinking about this copper band that I mentioned, how it's eating some of my LPS maybe. And I was thinking, I do work from home. I could throw in some mini mysis multiple times a day instead of just letting it get food that night. Because right now the copper band's getting 1 meal a day plus whatever flake food it happens to catch. So I'm thinking I'm going to start throwing in some frozen during the daytime. I mean, why not? And maybe that will get her fatter and happier, and she'll leave my other stuff alone because her belly's full instead of being hungry and thinking, well, what else is there to eat in this tank? All right, so I'm going to stop answering questions here. I'll come back to them. But I want to talk about my topic, which was prepping for the holidays, because that's an important one. So if you are about to go out of town to be with family for Christmas, for example, or to celebrate the New Year's with friends and family, it's just like planning for a vacation. You need to get your tank all taken care of this week, right now, starting today. You want to clean it, you want to clean the skimmer, you want to make sure that everything is working correctly, you want to check that batteries have been replaced if you have anything that's battery powered. You want to make sure you have battery backups in place in case there's a power outage. You want to have food on hand. You want to make sure you have salt on hand in case you have to do a water change. This is not the time to be like, oh yeah, I'm out of that, or I don't have this. I'm going to get that later. And then the day before Christmas, you're trying to do a ton of stuff. The sooner you clean your tank, the better, because it gives you a few days to observe, make sure all is well before you leave town. And that is so important. If you work on your tank like crazy the day before you leave because you know it needs the TLC, and so you do it, and then you do something like you forget to turn something on and you walk out the door and you're gone for a week or you're gone for 5 days or whatever. That happened to me. I was doing one of those things like I'm saying to you right now, don't do. I was cleaning my tank and I thought, oh, let me clean the vortex. And so I cleaned them and I reinstalled them and I forgot to turn them on and I went to Mackinac and I was gone for 7 days. I had no flow in this end of the tank for 7 days. So dumb. All I do is hit the on button and I just forgot. And my tank sitter said, I noticed they were off, but I thought you had a good reason. Like, no, I'm an idiot. So I said, next time you ever think I have a good reason, send me a text and say, why are these off? That way I can say, oh, that's a mistake, please fix that, So dumb. So anyway, by getting the work done this weekend, for example, then you have all next week to kind of keep an eye on things and everything's going well. And then as you get closer to the holiday, you're like, okay, tank's doing great. I don't have to worry about it. Now, the other end of that spectrum is everyone coming to your house for Christmas or for New Year's Eve. When you have a lot of people come into your home, there's a lot of mouth breathers that are sucking up the air and giving off CO2. And the higher the CO2 in the house and around the aquarium, the lower the pH is of the tank. So you want to keep that in mind. It's not that people can't be near your tank. You might need to bring in fresh air. You might want to add an air stone possibly to add some extra air. Or you just kind of plan accordingly. Think ahead. Don't just let it plummet and watch everything just start withering away all of a sudden. It can be pretty dramatic. The more people in the room breathing, the quicker this comes down. Now, of course, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. What's the size of the tank? How much is it enclosed? How big is the room the people are in? How many people are coming? I've had 15 people in this house before. I've had 25 in this house at one point for a party. And the pH didn't take a big dip, but it's a huge tank. But if your pH is really nosediving, you might even need to buffer it up a little bit for that actual visit. You can actually use a pH buffer that one day. Maybe halfway into the party, just buffer up your tank and then keep enjoying the party. So that is another thing to keep in mind. Another very important facet is letting your house guests know what the rules are about the aquarium, because people come over and like, oh, it's so pretty, and then they just start doing whatever they want to do. It's insane. They just think they can do anything. Can't tap on the glass. Can't put anything in the tank. When you're drunk, you can't put anything in the tank. You don't add a little beer to the tank because the fish are thirsty too. I mean, you got to just basically spell it out and say, I'm not being rude, but no one touches my tank. Period. No kids. I don't want kids playing and yanking on it. I don't want kids climbing up to it. You know, we can look at it. I can feed the fish later to show you guys how they eat. You know, that's about it. But I mean, you kind of have to be a little bit sturdy or strict about that and just explain, because it's your baby. You've got a lot of time and you've got a lot of money invested in it, and you want your livestock to be safe. And if there is an incident, you're going to be really upset you didn't say something. So don't just assume they know better. Just spell it out. It's uncomfortable for a second, but at the same time, if you walked into their house and they had some rules like don't let the dog out of the back room, you wouldn't question it. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, no problem. I don't want to get bit by a dog. And so you would just like, I'll stay away from the back room. So it's the same principle. You know, we've got pets and they have needs, and we need to protect their needs from people that don't know anything about aquariums. So I think that's it. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, I'll be happy to bring them up here into the chat so you guys can onto the screen. But what are some of the things you've done to prepare your tank for the holidays? Is there something specific that I didn't mention that you feel others could benefit from? Please add it to the chat, or if you're watching this video later, put it in the comments below. All right, let's get back to the questions. GMAC wants me to send a sweet refugium that's going to fit a sock. You know, usually the socks are inside the sump. By the way, I love your profile pic. Are those yours? That's gorgeous. Yes, let's hope for tomorrow, the anniversary update video. Art says, what did you do with all the corals and fish during the transition? When the tank leaked, it was leaking right from the middle of the seam. I'm just going to show you basically. It was the opposite corner, but it was right here. The water just peed straight out into the fish room. It was unbelievable. I had to put my finger over the hole to hold the water in, and I'm like, now what? So I drained the tank down below the leak, so I had about this much water left. And then I asked around everywhere and ended up borrowing a 215-gallon aquarium with a tank stand, canopy, the whole setup. The guy had just drained it, so it was empty and ready to move. And I jammed it into my fish room, and I took some sand out of the tank and put it in that tank, moved all the rock over, moved all the fish and corals over, and then we drained this tank and I cleaned it completely to get ready for repair. So that was a lot of work. It took, I think I had 2 other people come over during the moving the livestock, and we worked from the walkboard, and I could just hand things across to another person that was on a stepladder in front of the 215, and we just moved piece after piece of whatever had survived the leak. It was bad. I lost a lot of corals when that tank leaked because all the SPS were up high and the water had to come down to the midpoint, so everything above that level was exposed, and I couldn't grab giant colonies and put them low in the water, and I couldn't keep the water parameter straight because of the issues with no more sump anymore. It was quite the disaster. Reef 101, I'm going to answer your question with a picture and an update. We have 26 orders to go. It's actually 25 according to one person because they said they placed an order. So thanks for asking. Really close. I think we're going to hit it before Christmas. And then that means I can do the drawing immediately. I mean, I guess I did say anyone that orders during December, so I guess I have to wait till the end of December. That way anyone else that decides to order later in the month after I've already hit the 1,000 will have an opportunity too. I don't want to exclude people, but I was just thinking, oh, we can get to this this drawing quicker. But I think I have to wait till the end of the month for that, which means it'll go out after the first of the year. Do saltwater tanks last less than freshwater tanks? I don't think that the salt is the reason an aquarium fails. I don't think it's eroding the silicone, because silicone is inert, and it's not. Typically, when silicone is letting go, there's structural issues. The tank is shifting in the wall or on the stand. The glass was not fully cleaned during the build in the first place, and there was a little spot that is like a weak point. It could be bad construction, could be someone yanked on it, could be someone fell against it, could be your bracing is letting go from the inside edge. I mean, there's a lot of factors, but it's not the liquid inside that's making them fail. So I can't say that a freshwater tank will last longer than saltwater. I think maybe, I know nothing about freshwater, nothing. You know, maybe they don't clean them as much. They're not leaning on them as much. I don't know. But I've had a few tank failures out of all the tanks I've had for 22 years. And each one is frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, technically, I had a 280 leak and a 400 leak. My 29 didn't. My 55 didn't. My 3 didn't. My angle tank didn't. My sumps never have, you know, those are made of acrylic, but, and you know, the anemone cube has never leaked. So far, so good. But you know, that's just, you just never know. It can just happen. But I don't think it has any bearing on whether you're freshwater or saltwater. Puddle Aquatic says, I heard you in the past say that you have done 2 water changes this year. Are you running the Triton method? And if not, what are you doing to supplement the system with what it needs? I still have only done 2 water changes this year. And I keep threatening I'll do another one this month. But I gotta have time to fix the saltwater mixing station. I just need to spend a day on it. I need to probably order some parts that I haven't ascertained what I need. But I would love to get that fixed and running, because at this point, if something really bad goes wrong, I have to call the fish store for water in a hurry, rather than being able to just make some and have it ready instantly. And that's the wrong way to go about it. You know, you don't want to be calling your fish store owner at 3 in the morning saying, can you bring me 400 gallons of water? So, you ask what I supplement. The things I put in my tank, I don't run Triton. I put in Prodibio every 15 days. So it's Biodigest, Bioptim, IOD Plus, and Stronti Plus. I just recently started dosing AcroPower, which is an amino acid, once a week. And I dose Phosphate Rex about every 10 weeks. And I feed every day. I have a calcium reactor that takes care of alkaline and calcium. I'm dosing magnesium again now as of 6 weeks ago. I didn't for about 8 months, but now I'm dosing it. And by the way, I already mentioned it last week, I continue to see more and more color coming back to corals that had faded because of the lack of magnesium. So I'm really glad I started dosing it again. And you know, the ELOS test kit, which is almost empty, it's time to open a new kit. It was giving me a measurement of 1300. So it is low like I thought. My SPS, especially Montipore, really like 1400 ppm. And my Trident was telling me I was over 1400. That's why I stopped dosing, because I apparently had enough. But I kept having doubts. And so I decided finally after 8 months, I'm going to start dosing magnesium again, because I've always needed it. And when I did, I watched corals start coming back to life. I thought, oh man. And you know, that's kind of the downside of automated testing, is that like I've said, it makes me lazy yet informed. But at the same time, being told that number makes you think, well, then I don't need to add anymore. It's like, my salinity is perfect. Why would I add more salt? You know, it's one of those things. So I was relying on that number, even though my test kit was reading lower. I kept saying, well, obviously the more expensive device is going to have a better, more accurate measurement than my little test kit. But it was one of those things where I didn't know who to believe. Do I believe my test kit? Do I believe my Trident? And I decided to go with the Trident. And I was like, I believe it. And in the back of my brain, I still had these doubts. And so finally, I just started dosing. And I'm seeing stuff look better. I mean, I've got some Montipore over here that a lot of it had turned very pale, almost white. And there's one over there that turned completely white. And I had others that just, they were gone. And I did a video clip, which you'll see in the 6-year anniversary, where I pulled out a whole bunch of dead coral from the back of the reef, a lot of dead Monty. And so ever since I dosed, I'm seeing better color and improvement. So that is the other thing that I've been dosing. And that's about all I can think that gets put in the tank. There's no other additives. I don't use Reef Booster, I don't use Coral Vits, which are 2 other Prodibio products. I have them, I just don't put them in. Yeah, I think that's all I had. Let's see. John calls it the holiday apocalypse. Producer Reef, are you helping Jimmy Pop Colson with his tank? I want to see that tank. Matter of fact, I want to figure out where in the house it is. I kind of need to see like a top-down blueprint of the house to visualize where this tank is located, because I don't understand the layout of the house versus this immense 26-foot-long aquarium. I must see it in person. I agree with you. I want to go there, and I want to be there with my clip so it's not a blue video. Dave says, since we're talking about prepping for the holidays, Jake Adams once did an article on vacationing, and he said that the reef tank can go without feeding the fish or the tank for over a week. Would you do that? Absolutely not. I totally disagree with that thought process. Sure, as you add food to your tank, you're going to increase your nitrate and phosphate while you're out of town, but who cares? You're doing that even when you are at home. You're always adding nutrients to the tank every single day, and to stop adding any kind of food for a week is not what I would recommend. I'm all about feeding your fish. I have auto feeders in my tank that initially I bought to feed my tank when I travel, and then I decided to just leave them running. And they auto feed every single day on all 3 tanks, and I refill them as they get empty, and then I do my frozen food every single night. And I do a sheet of nori on the tank. I'm trying to do it daily. It's not quite 7 days a week, but it's almost daily that I put in a clip in there with nori there, and I have a little clip in the anemone cube for Dory, and I give her a little piece of nori, and she just nibbles at it. She likes it. I need to take care of her even more. I think she doesn't get as much nori as the big tank does. Callie says, how often can you use Live Rock Enhance? I dosed last night. I'm pretty sure the package recommended 3 times the first week and then 2 times every week after that. It's not something you have to do constantly. You're just going to kind of like add it and add it and add it. And I think basically after a month, you should see quite a difference in what the tank looked like from the beginning to where it is now after that month has elapsed. Does it mean you should never use it? I'm kind of at the point where I'm ready to use it in my tank again. My tank doesn't have like big issues or things that concern me, but you know, I mean, I don't know. This right here, I'm not going to try not to spook the purple tank. This right here where the plate coral is, that's all dead skeleton. This is the living part of the plate right here. And this part here was killed by the anemone. And that part's a little dirty. There's coralline on there. There's some red gunky looking stuff. And I bet if I put Live Rock Enhance in the tank, it'll just make it look clean. It'll still be dead, but it'll be clean and dead. And so I use it sporadically rather than regularly. I don't feel like it's a maintenance dose. Live Rock Enhance can also be used for curing live rock, which is a kind of a neat thing to do because you're adding bacteria to the rock as it's sitting in salt water in circulation, and with a little heater to kind of keep temperature up. And anything that's on the rock that's dirty will be consumed by this bacteria, and you end up with nice, clean rock to put in your tank. Sharkman7 says, any experience with flatworm exit and clams in a tank? Any problem using it with them? Well, it's not the flatworm exit that hurts the clams, it's the dying flatworms that hurts everything in your tank. So if you'll follow the article on my website, and it's just melosreef.com/flatworms, if you follow that article, I explain exactly how to treat a tank, and one of the first things I'm going to tell you in that article is that you need to siphon out every flatworm you can find for 14 days. So literally for 2 weeks, siphon them out. Use some airline tubing because it's really small diameter. You can suck out the flatworms and not lose much water, and that way you can continue to siphon without like, oh, I'm wasting so much water. You're not. You might have this much water in a 5-gallon bucket, and you might have 200 flatworms out of the tank. The next day you look in the tank and they're like, just like you've never even done any work on it. So you do it again, and you keep doing it, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it, till you've eliminated a lot of them. Then the last stragglers, there's still some in the system, but not very many. Now you can treat the tank with flatworm exit and kill off the last of them. And the benefit of reducing their population is when a few of them die, it doesn't nuke the tank. When you have thousands of them dying all at once, it it basically creates a huge ammonia spike, and everything starts dying, and it becomes a domino effect of how quick can you act before everything's gone. It's really awful. So you definitely want to remove remove as many as you can. Something in my throat. Jason Hunt says, which do you prefer, glass or acrylic tanks? I really like glass tanks, and specifically Starfire glass. Anytime I get a tank, it's Starfire. I don't like looking at a regular glass tank because it has that green tinge to it, or tint, and I'd rather it be clear, like acrylic. The problem with acrylic is it's so easy to scratch, so easy. My frag system is made of acrylic. I made that tank, and it's got some scratches. It just happens. So I prefer glass over that. Plus, you can use a razor blade on glass where you can't on acrylic. So acrylic can be polished out and made better looking again, but theoretically, you have to drain the tank to polish it properly and then reinstall it, and that's never fun. That's a big ordeal. Producer Reef says, can I restart my reef tank, bleaching the tank, and then restart it with live rock and bacteria? I'm taking out the corals and fish in quarantine. How soon after it gets stable can I add the coral back? Well, okay, so bleaching the tank, you're literally talking about putting bleach water in your aquarium and then rinse it really well and then use Prime to kind of make sure there's no chlorine left in the system. And then what's wrong with the tank now that it makes you want to go to this extreme? You know, is there a real problem in the tank? Is there like trash pallies everywhere? I mean, what's happening in the tank? But once the rock is in the tank and you've got, you know, I don't know if you didn't mention sand, so let's just say there's only the bacteria that's on the rock plus whatever filtration you've got tied into the system. You'll have to test your water, make sure everything's nice and there's no cycle. And if you have no spikes whatsoever, probably within a week or so, you could start putting in some kind of livestock and see how it does. I like to let things ferment for a few weeks. I mean, I'm never in a hurry. I tend to be more patient. I like to let things kind of settle before I move livestock. So I'd wait a few weeks, but I think if the water's testing good day after day after day, you might be able to put it in sooner. And hopefully the reset will go well. Coral Lover says, my tank has an algae outbreak, so now my corals are dying. Are they being smothered by the algae? Is that what's happening? I want to use Flux RX. Do you recommend it? Yeah, I do. It's worked very well for a lot of people. The Flux RX, the Reflux, and then a lot of people are talking about Vibrant, which I've never used, so I have no opinion on that one. But using the fluconazole product to get rid of algae in your tank really works. There's a guy not too far from me. I've had to tank sit for him a couple of times, and he was growing some kind of a crazy algae that just took over the tank, and he was out of town. And I even posted a picture on Instagram. I was killing time while I was at his house, and so I started pulling out all the algae I could. And I filled a bowl with algae. I mean, I pulled it off of everything I could reach. And I thought the tank looked better. And the next day I came back and it's like I did nothing. I was like, what is this stuff? And I pulled out another bowl's worth. And he came back home. He goes, hey, thanks for trying to clean my tank. He goes, it's a real problem. And so he got some Flux RX. And I talked to him 2 days ago. And he said, it's all gone. So that stuff really does work. Jay's Crazy Obsession says, I feed my fish 8 cubes of frozen and flake daily. How big's your tank? How many fish do you have? I feed quite a bit of frozen food myself, but it's not cubes. I get the sheets where I break off a piece, so it's a little harder to measure. Hi, Lynn. Welcome to the first live stream ever. We've had over 100. You've got a bunch of catching up to do. Thank you, Art. I appreciate the super chat. And Merry Early Christmas to you too. Mark, what is your favorite movie featuring the ocean and reefs? I love Coral Reef Adventure, and I probably saw it 6 times, 7 times. I even got it on, I think I have it on Blu-ray. So this was a movie that came out wow, maybe a decade ago, maybe even older, and it was being shown in the IMAX theater. And here in Fort Worth, where the IMAX is, it's not a flat screen. It was a dome that kind of went over and around the audience. And so, I mean, there's a little bit of a fisheye effect, but the way it was broadcast on that dome, you felt like you're in the reef. You're always looking around. It was like, wow. It was really neat. And the movie was really well made. There was a, oh, you know what? It's older than I thought. I'll tell you how I know. And it was filmed in a way where you could see the oceans, then you could see the reefs, you could learn about the divers going in, and they used the music from Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And it wasn't just one song of theirs, there was like 6 or 7 songs from that group, or band, or however we're going to call them, that went through the entire movie. So it was really kind of a cool, constant theme. So I loved it. And in 2003, I had to have emergency surgery. And when I got out of the hospital, I got a gift from my parents. And when I unwrapped it, it was a book that was like the filming of Coral Reef Adventure. And it gave me all the behind the scenes information about how they filmed that movie that I loved so much. I mean, it was like the perfect gift for me. And they were just happy to find me a book about oceans and corals. I was like, oh good, I hope he likes this. And it was amazing. So if you haven't seen that yet, I would definitely recommend it. I really, really enjoyed it. And it was beautiful. Now, of course, if you have Disney Plus, there's a whole National Geographic tab now that you can pick all these different nature shows, and there's quite a few about oceans you can pick. I know some people like different series, like in Blue Planet series, or different ones, but that one was a movie that I really liked. And everyone should see Chasing Corals. It was a good movie. It helped us understand a lot what's going on, but I kind of felt like it was a documentary about documentarians. Rather than being about the corals, it was more about what they were trying to accomplish with those corals. And there was some very vivid illustrations and good points to learn from about how corals respond in nature to what's happening with our Earth and with our environment. And there was a line in that movie where they talked about the corals are all these crazy colors, and people said they'd never seen them this color before. And the point they were making, spoiler alert, is that they were saying these corals were doing one last effort, screaming for help before they died. And I thought that's actually really interesting and not wrong, because I had an Acropora way back in the old days in my 29-gallon aquarium, and it was one color forever. And then for some reason over time, it started to shift, and it started going through different colors. And it was, I mean, it wasn't a rainbow. It was like, it just went from like brown to red to orange to yellow. And I'm like, okay, that's not right. That can't be. And I was watching go through these different color phases, and then poof, it was dead. And I was like, yeah, I saw that one coming a mile away. And I think that's pretty much what they were seeing in Chasing Corals. They were watching corals that were at the last ditch effort, sending up a white flag, so to speak, and they were glowing, like screaming for help. And so very good documentary. I saw that several times as well. Let's see. Fisher says, other than the big maintenance and then a top-off system like an ATO, automatic top-off, or automatic feeder, what else do you need when you're gone for 2 weeks? Whew. You know, I'd say a tank sitter is really important. I just, to leave your tank and literally no one touch it for 2 weeks or even look at it is amazing. And those that can do it, wow, I can't. I need someone to walk in here every single day and look at the tank and listen to the tank, and if there's anything weird going on, handle it or contact me so I can tell them what to do. And my tank sitter has said for the last 2 visits where he's had to watch my tank, nothing happened, which was great. You know, I was really happy. I was happy for him because so many times he's like, yeah, I had to rebuild your calcium reactor. And I'm like, you don't even have one. He goes, I figured it out. And I was like, oh my God. So I came home and it was working fine. I was like, okay, that's good. But a tank sitter would be one. Something that a lot of people are doing may be good, may not be good, is to get the Wise camera from Amazon, where you have these Wi-Fi webcams that you can look in the app on your phone and see how your tank is doing. And you could just open the app and take a look at things visually. If you have the Apex controller, you can log in and you can check via Fusion what your parameters are, your tank temperature is. You can kind of make sure everything's running correctly. Or if there's a problem, it could send alerts to your phone while you're traveling. That isn't really fun for a vacation. When you're gone, the last thing you want to see is your ATO is off and won't turn back on again. And you're like, I have 9 more days to go. So, I mean, in a way, it's not great to have those kind of alerts come up on your phone. But if you have a tank sitter, you can say, hey, I got an alert. I wanted to let you know there's something going on with my top off. Can you make sure that water is being added, or can you add the water manually for the rest of my trip until I get home? And that could be a solution there. So having a controller, having a webcam, and having a tank sitter would be the things I'd add besides the things you suggested for being out of town. I absolutely believe that Die Hard is a Christmas movie. And Bruce Willis joked in that roast that it's not. And I think he was roasting us because it totally is. And I will be watching it. By the way, under, I think this is also Disney Plus, they have a tab for Christmas movies. And they put in Iron Man 3 as a Christmas movie. And I'm like, I need to rewatch Iron Man 3 now to see why they say that. But I thought that was kind of funny. I wouldn't have thought one of the Avengers was a Christmas movie. Michael Wells says, Mark, when using copper, do you know if rock absorbs copper? I keep doing copper check. I check it with a Hannah, I come back to it, and the reading keeps dropping. I'm not sure if running carbon, etc. There's no sand. Okay, yes, rock definitely absorbs copper. And so we never use copper in our aquariums. If you are using some kind of copper treatment in a quarantine tank that has rock, the rule is that rock never leaves the tank again. It stays in that quarantine tank forever. It can't be used because it is absorbed in the rock and it'll keep coming off that rock. And if you move the rock into your reef, you're not going to be able to keep invertebrates. So running carbon can help to absorb some of it, but you may continue to run into problems for as long as that rock exists in your main reef tank. So that's why we never put copper in our display tanks. Sammy, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm glad that this channel is helping you and making it easier for you to enjoy this hobby, and I promise I will keep making videos. Tim's Aquarium House says, how long should I keep my new clownfish in a separating box so that all the other fish can get used to him? I have a 6-line wrasse devil. Well, maybe the 6-line wrasse belongs in the little box and you can put the clownfish in your tank now. Normally 3 days is long enough for an acclimation or not acclimation. 3 days is long enough for the fish to see each other and kill off some of that antagonism that goes on with new arrivals in the tank and lessen the aggression. So I would suggest 3 days. And then this needs to be in a box where they can see each other. If it's inside what kind of looks like netting, it's sort of like the breeder boxes that are completely opaque, the fish just see a shadow. They don't know what's in there. So that's not really the same. The Peacemaker is completely clear acrylic that I sell on my website that lets fish see each other for the amount of time that I suggested. And then you just pour it into the tank and they seem to get along just great. Surf Kook says, I was wondering how big the smartphone floater box is so I can make sure my phone fits it. And the dimensions are actually on the website. So when you look at the smartphone floater, it'll say the actual inside diameter or the inside area of the box. The viewing panel is 8 inches by 4 inches. So as long as your phone is a little smaller than that, you should be able to lay it right inside that box with no problem. Any issues with mixing or heating water for the first time when you fill up a tank to start the cycle? I also have live sand. I'm thinking I may need to add this once the water is heated and salt's mixed. Okay, so you're filling up the tank for the first time. You're just pumping in RO water slowly over several days' time, or you've made a bunch and you're pumping that water into the tank. Then you want to add your salt and you want to add some power heads and you want to get to mix in the tank itself. And then in theory, get the cycle started pretty quick. I kind of feel like, I mean, that's fine. If you want to do that, that is. I prefer to mix my salt water in a barrel and pump it in. And that's how I've always done it. I remember when I set up this tank the first time, and I told my dad I was going to fill it up tomorrow. And he said, well, have you tested it? And I was like, what do you mean test it? He said, did you fill it up with water first? I'm like, no. He goes, well, I would have thought you'd put the tank outside and fill it up with water, make sure it's good, and then bring it in. I was like, no way I would do that. It's 400 pounds, or gallons. It took 12 people to carry the tank into the house. Well, don't you want to fill it up with regular water first before you make the salt water? I'm like, no, I don't. So I fill it with salt water. And I wouldn't mix it in the tank. But I mean, some people do. It's okay. You can pour the salt, the water in, and then add the salt, and like I said, power heads, and stir it up and get it going. And then after it's mixed, then you can add your rock. I would hold off on the live sand for some reason. I think if you had dry sand, you could put that in. Once the salt water is mixed. I wouldn't want to add salt on top of the sand or pour sand on top of lots of salt laying on the bottom of the tank that hasn't quite dissolved yet. So I would mix it all up, then I would add the sand. And then after the tank is cycled, then I'd add the live sand on top, the top ½ inch all the way across the reef. I think that's how I'd handle it. When I set up my tank, I put the sand, well, I put in the acrylic trays first that had the pillars that hold all that rock up. And then I put all the rock in place. And then I filled it with the sand. And then I added water. And it went for a month. And after the month, I added my trays of live sand. I think that's the correct order how I did it. I don't know that I put the live sand through a cycle. I can't remember. I'd have to go back to my blogs to double check that one. Maybe I don't remember. I feel like I would have held off on the live sand. I think I would have saved that for later when the tank is ready for livestock. And then I add the live sand, and now I've added a whole bunch of fresh bacteria, and then within a day or two I was adding livestock. Michael says, what are your thoughts on lava rock in a display tank in the sump and negative things you think, such as metals? That was the worst sentence I've had today. Lava rock oftentimes has metals within it, so we don't use that in our saltwater aquariums. I believe that it's probably more often used in freshwater systems or in a fire pit where it belongs. But I wouldn't use it in a tank. Jose says, if someone would drop in a drop of alcohol in the tank, how much of a water change would you have to need to do? Well, it depends how much they put in. Like if somebody poured an entire beer bottle, odds are something's going to die, and your skimmer's going to go a little crazy, and you're probably going to have to, run some fresh carbon, and you have to get the skimmer settled down again. I don't know. I would, like I said, I would tell my audience, my visitors, no one touches my tank or pours anything in the tank. So, but I guess I would have to base it on what's going on with the livestock to know how much of a situation I've got on my hands. But it could be 25% of a water change, like we do after ChemiClean. Fortunately, I've never had that happen to me, so I've had to deal with it. But it's a good question. I just don't know the exact answer. Sorry. Tim says, put this on the screen. How many people would love to see Mark get a top-down reef cam? It's not a bad question, but there's very little to see when the flow is going. And the flow is going all the time except when I feed the tank. So I feed the tank every night right around 10:30 p.m., which is Central Time. And then the return pump is off for 10 minutes, and the reef is beautiful. And I enjoy looking down on it. And there's times where I shoot video, and that's going to be in the 6-year anniversary video because I shot some for you guys. But To get a camera that's dedicated to where anyone can view it, I'd have to find out what's involved. I mean, obviously you got to be connected to something nonstop, and it probably has to go to some portal that everyone else logs into there, rather than, I've got a friend who's got a webcam in California that a lot of people like to view, and you get in line and you wait for that person to finish, and then the next person gets to view, and they get to control the controls of the camera, and then the next person gets in, and that's kind of neat. And, you know, of course, I always go in late at night, and that's usually no one's on, and I can check out his tank. But to set up a tank camera that is visible at all times, I don't know the logistics. I'd have to find out what's involved. And Reef and Dive, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. How much does a saltwater water change cost? Depends. If you're making your own water at home, it's just the price of making water at home plus the salt that you buy. If you're buying it at the fish store by the gallon, I think you pay about $1 or maybe $1.25 per gallon for salt water. If you're buying RO water from the fish store, it's usually about 50 cents a gallon, and then you add your own salt. The salt you buy could be, depending on the size of the container, could be between $26 and $120, depending on the brand. And for example, a bucket of salt makes roughly, well, for us it makes about 44 gallons of salt water. It says 50, but we make 1.026, and so we use more salt, which gives us less gallons. And I think to get 50 gallons, it'd probably be more like 1.021. So we have a higher salinity for reef tanks, so we use a little bit more salt. Making water at home with your own RODI system, the first year you buy an RODI system, like the one I sell on my website, you're paying for the unit, and then you hook it up to your house and you make water, and you're paying for the water from the city that goes into it, and you're buying a replacement set of filters after 6 months. So that mathematically breaks down to about 7 cents a gallon of RODI water that you've made at home. And then after the first year, after that year has gone by, the second year, all you got is the price of replacement filters, and that's going to only run you about 3 cents a gallon to make water at home. So that's why I always make water rather than buying it somewhere else, because it saves me a lot of money. And I buy a monster container of salt once a year, I guess. This one's probably 2 years old because I've barely done any water changes. And that barrel makes like 1,000 gallons of salt water. And I've only used about 2/3 of it, so I still got quite a bit left. But that one, because I bought such a big amount, saved me money in salt as well, which again keeps the price down. So I don't have a solid, like, to the nickel price on salt water that you make at home. I've never tried to figure it out. But let me try some math here really quick while you're all sitting here waiting. So assuming I paid $350 for that barrel of salt, that's probably 35 cents per gallon, and then the price of the water, which I said was 3 for me. So 38 cents a gallon to make my own water at home, and that might be high. It might be less. Fisher says, what is the cheapest way to set up a quarantine tank? Is there any all-in-one tank that's not too expensive? Also, what are your thoughts on small protein skimmers, 10 to 40 gallons? All right, so the cheapest quarantine tank is going to be the dollar sale from Petco, and you can get a tank that's $1 a gallon. So you can get a 10-gallon tank for $10. You can get a 20-gallon tank, like a 20-gallon long, for example, if you liked one that's a little shallower and longer. Give you a little more swimming space in there. You need a hang-on-back filter. Those run 15 to 20 bucks. You need a heater. You need an ammonia alert badge to make sure ammonia doesn't go up. You need a thermometer. It's $2. You're going to need certain test kits, which typically range from ammonia, nitrite, nitrate. You might need a copper test kit. The things you need for that tank, specifically for quarantine. It probably needs its own dedicated net for scooping out so you don't cross-contaminate between aquariums. And you don't need a light because it's quarantine. Quarantine doesn't need a light. So just the ambient room light is plenty. And then, of course, you're going to be putting in some food, and you're going to be siphoning it out. So you need a tube to siphon water out, like you do for a water change. But again, if you don't want to cross-contaminate, it should have its own tube, its own bucket, for water changes, so you don't get any of that into the main system and accidentally introduce something like ick from your quarantine tank through a dirty hose into the main reef. That would be terrible. Typically, a quarantine tank can be set up, depending on what you already own that's sitting in the garage, $50 to $100. It's not a lot. An all-in-one tank will probably cost you a little bit more than that. So I would do that. And then regarding skimmers, I'm not really familiar with the small skimmers, because I've had such big tanks for so long, but Aquamax makes some small ones. Cobalt started selling the Aqua Sea line, which I loved, the Remora skimmer, and so that should be available to buy these days. And the Remora was set up for 65 gallons and less, and the Remora Pro was for 125 gallons. So one of those, and they hang on the back to take up very little space. They're pretty quiet. Those would be good. But there's so many things on the market now. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's got a cute little skimmer that works great. Where is my voice going today? Wakar says, any tips on start a new setup? Yes, go to milosreef.com. And on the front page of the site, as you're there, you will see the new to saltwater graphic. Click on that, and it'll take you to all my articles that help you set up a tank and teach you all the things you need to know before you spend $1. Because it's so important that you're educated, because the more you know before you start, the more successful you'll be, and the better it'll be for the fish and corals that you buy. And these are animals with lives, so we want to be the best we can for them. We don't want to do it halfway. Surf Kook, I have no idea what you typed. I can't figure it out. D3V1115H says, what are good encrusting corals that will fuse or just live side by side without one killing the other one or overgrowing the other one? Well, Favia corals tend to grow next to each other and not duke it out too hard. But there can be at some point, there may be some kind of aggression. Encrusting Montiporas tend to do pretty well side by side. Trying to think what else. Trying to think what's in. Oh, and chalices seem to tolerate each other pretty well. They're kind of an encruster too as well. They kind of spread across the rock. So that would be my my thoughts. But eventually, somebody might overtake the other. I mean, it's very rare to have two things just grow together and do nothing. They will either duke it out and there'll be a white line between the two, or they will curl upward and start growing up and trying to overtake the other guys, trying to overtake the other guy. That can happen too. But I like Montipora. It's a pretty good encruster. It covers a lot of rock. There are different types of Montipora. So there's digitata, which are the little sticks. There's Capricornus that does the swirls. And then there's Montipora Danae, which is going to be things like the Sunset Montipora, the Reverse Sunset Montipora, the Chili Pepper, the Strawberry Fields. Strawberry Fields is a plating. But the encrusting one, Jedi Mind Trick is another one that encrusts over the rock. It doesn't spread out into the open. So those are good ones that encrust and look pretty nice side by side. Jay's Crazy Obsessions asks, I have a hose from the sink to my tank and a hose from the tank to the toilet. Could I do a similar water change system with saltwater? Not really. Basically, you're going to want to drain from your saltwater tank into something nearby, like a bucket. If you had a long enough hose that would reach from the tank to the toilet, like you were doing, you probably going to need a pump on the end that's inside the tank that will be sucking water in and pushing it out the hose to go to your toilet. And then the water going into your tank is made in a barrel of salt water, so it's not going to come from your sink. you're going to not use tap water, you're going to use RODI water, which is filtered water that is nice and pure. And if you use sink water, you're going to end up running into issues that will drive you nuts, and you'll be upset, and you'll say, why did I ever do this? So I would just get away from the entire idea of using tap water. You want to filter it. And if you need an RODI filter, it's sold on my website. It's in the RODI filter section in the shop. And a 100-gallon-a-day system, which means it makes 4 gallons per hour, it's going to cost $184 plus shipping. Tim says, how about going over a quick list of the most aggressive corals and what corals you can group without a problem? Well, if we got rid of all the aggressive corals, you can group everything else together. And that's a vague answer. Hydnophora is super aggressive. The Hollywood Stunner Chalice coral is super aggressive. Torch corals are super aggressive. Pavona is definitely aggressive. They are fast growing. They put out these long sweepers and they sting their nearby neighbors. This one isn't aggressive, but it's super fast growing, and that's green star polyps. And they just take up real estate and grow over things that take longer to grow, and they can just smother it. So those are in the aggressive family that come quickly to mind. Mushrooms have a sting, and so corals that are near them get stung on the side, and they can even burn off their tissue because of the mucus coming off of that mushroom. Mushrooms are really sturdy little guys. And they spread a lot, and they spread out, and they will spin off the rock and land somewhere else and take hold and spread out over there. So mushrooms are pretty aggressive too in that regard. There are some favias that put out long sweepers. I have one in the back of my reef that was sitting on the sand perfectly fine, and Dwayne was here and says, why is this down here? Here, I'll fix that. And he glued it onto the rock. And I was like, well, thanks, okay. I probably should have done that. And then a couple days later, we went to Aquashella, and I bought this really pretty war coral, which is a favia, and I put it, or maybe Dwayne put it, like a few inches away from that other one, and that coral was not doing well. It was getting worse and worse. Like, what is wrong with this coral? Everything I put in my tank does well, and this thing is just withering away. And I looked at it late at night, and all these sweepers are coming out of the one that he had glued to the rock, and it was stinging it. And I sent him a picture. I said, I figured out why this war coral is not doing well. And he goes, oh, I forgot they do that. So that little nugget of death needs to be by itself. And then things you can group together would, like LPS corals, we like to put all our acans together, but they need to be acan lortoensis, which are the individual polyps. Each one, there's a polyp and a polyp and a polyp and a polyp. They're all separated like little pillows. They're really pretty. If you get acan echinata, which is this one right here, that one is just a solid mass with a lot of little mouths in it, but it's a stinger. That's why it's all by itself. I don't let it go in near anything, and so it hasn't been able to kill anything in years. It just lives and grows and gets bigger, and occasionally I break a piece off and someone goes home and they're very happy. Other things you can put together would be different mushrooms can be together, different recordias can be together, different colors. You can put frog spawns and hammers together. You can put acros all together. They need room to grow, but I mean, they can be together, so to speak, in a group, and you can have the mixture of colors like a red one and a green one and a blue one, so it's a nice appearance. Those all go well together. Chalices I like to have down low. I kind of like them on the sand, honestly, but some people like them on the rock, and they can do really well to fill in a space where there's something lacking. And that pretty much covers it. Gorgonians are too tall to group, but I mean, if you wanted multiple Gorgonians, you could definitely have several different types in your tank, maybe in a group in one area, or maybe spread across the tank, so you have some of that diversity throughout the reef. Oh. You're saying you have a 15-gallon tank. Do I think that the phone floater will fit into that tank? It might. You'd have to measure your tank. The box itself is 8.5 inches long by 4.5 inches wide. The inside of the box is 8 inches by 4 inches, which is where your phone goes. Maybe that's what you're asking me before. I think I got it now. Hey, Joe has a cool tip for those of you guys with Android phones. If your camera mode has night sight in it, you can use that to remove a lot of the blue. And so on his Google Pixel 3. It's working really well for him. That's cool to know. There's also an app that Dwayne started using that he really likes, but I just like using the Lps Coral lens clip that you just put on your phone, and it's got 3 little holes here for the camera. My phone is always naked. I don't have it in a case, and this fits on perfectly on it. I don't have any problems. If you had a case, it still spreads pretty wide, so I think that you could definitely fit it around most cases. And this is working on 11 Pro. I can actually use both the 1-time and the 2-time camera, and then if I want to use the widescreen, I just move the clip further down to open up over that 3rd camera. So I can actually use it in all 3. I didn't need a special new clip. It works just the way it was made. Callie says, I was just at my LFS yesterday. He mentioned you'll be hanging out with us at his booth at the Niagara Coral Show. That is true. What day am I speaking? I don't know. Will there be stickers and mugs to purchase? I don't know. I'm kind of wiped out on stickers right now, and I stopped selling mugs when I sold the last one, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 months ago. The company I did business with for the mugs, I love the mug, but this is my last mug. And the company was horrible to deal with, and I don't want to give them any more dollars ever again. But I would love to get a mug like that one again if some other company existed that could do the job right. But it was a nightmare. So I just don't feel like, there's times I'm like, oh, I should just order again, because everyone wants them. But that company was so bad. I mean, when I got the mug, the logo was sideways. And I'm just like, they're all crooked. And they said, we don't guarantee position on the mug. I said, what are you talking about? They said, we don't guarantee position. I'm like, I didn't ask you where on the mug to put it, but you put it on the mug level. I mean, when you go through the catalog, when you go on their website, everything's perfectly on the items. Not one of them is crooked. And the fact that half my order was right proves they could do it. I felt like the person that was doing my order said, hey, I got to grab lunch in 5 minutes. Let me knock out these other 25 really quick, and just did them like crap. And they were horrible. And then I got about 6 or 8 were broken in shipping. And they said, well, we'll give you credit for the ones that broke. I didn't order some that are broken. I ordered a bunch of mugs. If you order 55 of something, you want 55. Yes, something can break. I get it. But I said, look, you guys have to fix all these ones that are wrong. And so they said, as a one-time courtesy, we'll do it again. And so I said, well, look, there's a 30 in a box. You're sending me 24. I'll even buy 6 more to fill the box completely, so you make a little bit more money as you're going through the hassle of redoing these. And they said, okay, thanks, give us your money. So I did. And then what I received was another box that you could just shake it and hear the broken mugs. And it was a horrible, cheap box from China. Not the nice one I got. The first box I got was like this big and this wide. It was like a 40 breeder. And the mugs were all spaced out inside a cardboard sheet with these cutouts where the mug would fit into each one of them. And then they had another sheet that fit on the top. So they were snugged in perfectly and couldn't touch each other. And then they did another row and they did another row. And that was a beautiful packaging. I was really impressed. The box I got the second time, the replacement, where they're trying to make me happy, it was like the skinniest box they could find with like the thin little cardboard between wine bottles. And of course things broke. And I was just like, oh my God, you guys literally hate me. I mean, you have no desire to make me happy. You would think, God, we really screwed this up. Let's make it up to him so he'll buy from us again in the future. And instead, they gave me their abs. You know the saying, it's the least I could do? That's literally what they did. The least they could do. So I don't want to give them any more money. So that's a long answer to your question about will there be mugs in Niagara? I'm kind of thinking maybe not. Trevor says, have any of your fish or your clownfish bred? I have seen eggs in my tank from different species. At one point, I was wondering about this weird clutch that I'd never seen before, and my friends said that was a chromis clutch of eggs. And then I had some damsels in my frag system laying a huge patch of eggs, which was really cool. I've seen the clownfish in the anemone cube lay eggs one time and never saw it again, which is really weird because there's so many mature fish in there. And I'm just wondering if they're laying them somewhere inside where I can't see them at all. I kind of keep my eyes open, but I don't see anything happening, which is kind of odd. I would think by now somebody would be doing it regularly. And the skunk clownfish haven't laid any eggs anywhere that I've seen either, which is surprising. Other than that, no. There's no other little surprises from any other fish that I'm aware of. Anthony says, I've been watching for a long time and I had a question. How many tangs can I have in a 100-gallon tank? Well, I would say that you're going to want little tiny tangs in your 100-gallon tank. I would say, I mean, if I had to arbitrarily pick a number, I would say 2. 2 different ones maybe, or maybe 2 matching ones, like 2 hippos or 2 yellows or 2 coals or something maybe. I don't know. I don't know if you can put coals together. That might be wrong. But that would be kind of cool. Or you could have like a coal and a yellow, or a coal and a powder blue. They're completely different shapes. But I would stick to 2 because the tank is only 100 gallons. And as the fish gets bigger, you're going to realize you need to get a bigger tank. And you're going to need more room. Now, I've had that hippo inside my anemone cube for about 3 years or so, and it started off like 1 inch. Adorable little speck of blue swimming around in the tank. And now it's about that big. But when I stand and I look at the tank that's 24 inches wide and there's a fish this big, I still don't feel the pressure to move it, even though I know at some point it needs more room to swim. But for now, Dory is staying where she is because I just don't see the need. But if and when I replace that tank, I will probably scoop her out then and put her in the frag tank, which is a 60-gallon also, but it's a 4-foot long tank, so there's more swimming room for distance. Mr. Reefbuster says, my Chaetomorpha is starting to turn white. Any idea why? Should I introduce flow into the fuge section to help turn it? Okay, think about this. A lot of people are putting Chaetomorpha in reactors with the lights around it, and they open it up a month later and it's full of this green stuff, and nothing moved it. It wasn't tumbling in the reactor. It just kind of grew and grew like steel wool. It got bigger. So the whole tumbling technique behind Chaetomorpha, I don't know that it's really as necessary as what was originally diagnosed years ago. You could try. You could even flip it over and just see how it does for a while. I have a feeling the part that's turning white is just getting cooked by your lights. Whether it's heat or just too much light intensity for too long. Chaetomorpha does not need 24 hours of light. And if you're using like one of those pink lights that so many people love these days, maybe it's just a little too close to the water. It needs to be lifted up a little bit higher up. But you could try flipping it. Another thing that may be happening, but I'm really thinking it's light that caused this, or even being at the surface where it's exposed to air. But there's a chance you need to dose iron to your refugium. And that might help the plants a little bit absorb whatever they need to stay a little more healthy. Myself, I haven't had much luck with Chaetomorpha, so I only have anecdotal advice on that one because I just put it in, it doesn't do well, and that's it. And then if a couple years like, let me try some again, I put some in, it doesn't do well. I'm like, okay. And I just don't have the right, it's just certain things I can't seem to grow in my tank. I have a horrible time with the Recordia. I have a horrible time with Chaetomorpha, but I used to not be able to keep blue torts alive, and I've got one over there that's about this big now, maybe this big, and I've got one in the middle of the reef that's about the same size, and I used to never be able to keep blue tort alive. So things change over time. But that would be my suggestion. Look at the light, how long it's on, and if it's too close, and maybe you just flip it over and see how it does. Maybe you need to turn it once every couple of days. Or you could try the tumbling thing and see if you see a change. Refresh says, what if a fish tank has copper plumbing? I don't even know if freshwater can do that, but I know saltwater can't. Copper in saltwater doesn't work, so you can't do that. Hey Scott, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, I didn't want to cut into Tidal Garden's live stream, but we're always here after he's long done. Back to the quarantine tank questions. How do I set up a quarantine tank? Do I need to add substrate and rock? Do I need to cycle it before you put fish in? What type of filter should I use? How long should it run before I get fish? Okay, so one of the simplest things to do, you get yourself a small tank from Petco, and you get a hang-on back filter that's matched to the size of that tank. You could also add an air stone if you want to with an air pump with a check valve so water can't siphon into the air pump and ruin it. You'll need a heater, you need a thermometer, you need the ammonia alert badge I mentioned before, and let's just say it's a 10-gallon tank. Now, all you've got in there is what I said, the gear and some water. You don't need substrate, you don't need any kind of sand. You don't need to put rock. If you choose to put rock in the quarantine tank, that rock stays with that tank for life. It will always be in your quarantine tank forever. It's just a thing for the fish to swim around or tuck under when they want to feel a little bit of safety. A lot of people don't use rock. Instead, they use PVC fittings where the fish can go inside the tube and inside an elbow and inside a T fitting and just kind of rest and get a break from wandering eyes. Some people stack the pipes together to make like a pyramid and set it in the corner for the fish to, like I said, dart behind or dart inside of. There's that. I actually like rock inside a quarantine tank. It just makes me feel better. But like I said, the rock I put in there stayed in there for the life of that tank. Now, how soon can you put livestock in there? Yes, the tank has to be cycled. You can't just start it with salt water and throw your brand new fish in there and expect it to work. The filtration can't keep up. One of the easiest ways is to take a sponge of some kind, and I'm not really talking about like the sponge you use in your kitchen sink. I'm talking about the kind of, it's like a little bit more stiff, hard plastic filter sponge like we see in aquariums. And you can float something like that in your display tank sump for a few weeks and let it just kind of get populated with bacteria. You can take that and you can put it in your quarantine tank and let it to seed that tank and kind of get things going. That's one of the best ways to kind of get things going. You just do that for, you move that sponge over, you leave it in there for a few days, and then you're ready to introduce the new fish you got from the fish store. And then in that case, once you've done it and you remove the sponge, clean it really well. Remember, the sponge that you put in the quarantine tank that was brand new set up, that sponge was introducing things to that tank. There's nothing in that tank, no livestock yet. You can actually put the sponge back in your sump. But if you've been using that quarantine tank for a while and you're trying to reseed it, there's a chance that you will bring things from the quarantine tank into your main display. So don't go backwards with it. Otherwise, get a new sponge in your sump that's waiting to be moved over. And then I was going to say, I'm not a guy I'm not a fish disease guy, and I don't have any advice in that regard. I'm more about an observation guy. I look at the livestock, I feed it. As the fish are being fed, if they don't eat it within 5 minutes, it's just lying on the bottom of the glass and they're not showing any interest in that, I siphon that out because that could make ammonia rise. So you're removing the waste 5 minutes after feeding. You're going to do water changes daily. 10% water change on a 10-gallon tank is 1 gallon water change. So if you were to make 5 gallons of salt water and have it circulating with a MaxiJet next to your 10-gallon tank, you could actually do a 1 gallon water change 5 days in a row from that batch of salt water you mixed. And that 10% water change will keep up with everything on the tank daily to avoid any kind of an ammonia spike that could hurt your new fish. So the filter helps on the back of the tank, the sponge helps seed it, the water changes are critical, and then it's just a matter of keeping an eye on your new pets and seeing that they're healthy. And if you do discover some kind of a disease, some kind of an outbreak, you can handle it in a hospital tank rather than putting it into your main reef and infecting every other fish you already own. Yeah, Jason, it was 12 people. There was I think I got 8 suction cups from 2 fish stores in the city that were within driving distance. And we used furniture dollies. I mean, that thing was 1,200 pounds. And it was really hard getting this through the door. We actually brought it through the door on its side. So the front or the back is what was actually facing the carpet. And we slid it up the hallway and into this area. Then we had to lift it onto the stand. And the stand is 42 inches high. So that was quite the lift. Refresh says, how's the walkboard working out for you? That's great. It's heavy. It's really heavy. It's heavier than what it was before, but it's easy to remove and easy to insert into the stand. So that part's good, but oh my God, it's heavy. I'm like, I kind of just want a second one for the back now so I don't have to move it. But there's times where I don't want a walkboard here when you're walking in because the doorway's right here and it's kind of narrow. And this sticks out, about that far from the tank, so it kind of blocks the walkway a little bit. Adam says, do you think the substrate, the reborn media that you used inside the refugium works out better than the deep sand bed you did last time? Well, I haven't really seen much of a change in it lately. It's just, I mean, it's doing its thing. I need to get in there. Like I said, I need to make salt water. And once I do the salt water, then I can go ahead and I can change some water out of the system, and I can siphon out the refuge and make it nice and clean again. Because I do know there's a lot of detritus packing in between all that gravel now. But it's definitely going to be easier to clean than a sand bed. So, but I haven't seen any other change. I haven't seen it do better or worse. I haven't seen anything change on the tank itself. Mark says, you should turn some of these super chats into orders for your countdown. That's kind of a cool idea. I hadn't thought about that. Tomic Construction says, I have a citron goby that sits on my new acro frag all the time. Will this affect the acro's health and growth? Thanks. Actually, it can. And if that goby decides that it wants to lay eggs on the acro, it might actually chew some of the tissue off the side of it to leave a bald spot so it can plant the eggs. That can happen. Usually it happens in a colony, not like on a frag, because there's no protection. But if it's in a colony and the citron goby goes down in there and makes a bald spot, it's kind of protected from all the other fish from getting near it. So that's why they do that. But that goby is going to move around a lot. It's not living on your acro. It may seem to be there a lot, but odds are if you were to watch from across the room, it probably perches in all kinds of different places throughout the day. So you shouldn't have to worry about that too much. All right, I'll be right back. I need to unplug a pump. I think I might have mentioned this to you guys before. My Nero 5 pump sometimes makes this really loud grinding noise. And yet when I take it apart, there's nothing wrong with it. It's not dirty. There's nothing looks wrong. And I clean it and I put it back together and it's dead silent again. For some reason, it just randomly decides to make this loud noise that I could hear it from the bedroom. I'm like, what does that sound? So I guess I'm going to have to replace that pump at some point soon. It was starting to do it right now and it's bugging me, so I had to go turn it off and on. Glenn Smith says, I see many SPS corals growing fine in shaded areas. Your yellow plate coral, you're talking about this one right here? Is looking great. Well, in the very back where it's really in there, it's lost some tissue. It's like bold. And that's unfortunate because it's a beautiful coral. But yes, they do need light. They need lots of good light. And they also benefit from the light reflecting off the sand bed, bouncing back up to the underside, which I think is probably what's helping these corals to endure the lack of light. I've got an acro right here that is under this one right here, which as you can see, it's really dark even on the video. That's a massive shadow. So the part that looks pretty is the part that is extended out and grown into the light, and the part underneath has less light. Down under here, in that spot right there, is a white stick. That's actually a coral that has no light whatsoever, so it's just turned white. So yes, they do need a lot of PAR, and that's why we provide it for them to help them grow quickly and beautifully. And you know, a lot of people have added, in addition to their LED lighting, they're adding T5 bulbs, and that's to fill in all the shadows so that the entire tank looks lit, and their corals seem to do better. It's because there's more light. So yes, more light is important. I would not say that that they would do fine in shaded areas. They really don't. They really do need the light. Insane Reefer, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. Do it before the end of the year. Colinu, don't you want me to tell you how much it is? She says, ignorance is bliss on the cost of a saltwater tank. I don't even want to try and do all the math on how much I spent on it over the years. Yeah, I don't blame you. But I do tell people interested in getting into this hobby that if you want to do it right, and you're using new equipment that's quality equipment, you're looking at about $47 per gallon. So that just gives you a ballpark number so you can kind of quickly say, okay, a 100-gallon tank, $4,700. Do I really want to do this? I mean, can it be done for less? Yes, but that's about the price. Luke, you need to come to one of my many presentations about aquascaping. Aquascaping should never look man-made. It should never look straight. You have to decide if you want to lean it against the glass or not. You want to decide if you're going to support it under the sand or if you're going to set it on the sand. If the tank's going to have no sand. There's a lot of things that come into play. But aquascaping itself is quite a topic of its own. Insane Reefer says, did you ship the stickers? No, I have to go through the entire list of winners. The group of stickers I've left are for those people, and I have to address a lot of envelopes. So those I hope to get out next week. Sorry about the delay. Lucas, the update on the tank? Well, there's going to be a video review that I hope to release tomorrow. Other than that, I kind of update about my tank on every live stream. Adam says, any suggestions on killing Asterina starfish? If you have a chorus wrasse besides manual removal. Well, manual removal is the easiest. Harlequin shrimp eat starfish, including Asterinas. I actually have a ton of Asterinas in my tank, and I literally don't care. I couldn't care less. They are fine. They've been crawling all over my tank for years and years. There's lots of them, and I don't mind. They do no harm, in my opinion. I've got zoanthids, I've got palithoa, I've got SPS, LPS, chalices. Everything's in there, and there's Asterinas too. I don't care. What are your thoughts about Leptocerus? It's a beautiful little coral. I had one that I think got shaded and finally ended up dying in my tank because it needs light too. Hello, reef dudes. You still haven't told us who the other dude is. Come on, dude. Tell us. Luke says, how do you like your whitetail bristle-tooth tang, and how good are they at eating algae? She loves eating algae. She's a very active, busy cleanup fish. I see her kissing the glass when there's algae on it. She gnaws on rocks. She'll nip at the sand. She definitely chases down the nori sheets. She's actively happy for frozen food at night. It's a great worker fish. If you had to get a coal, the yellow-eyed coal, a tang, the yellow-eyed coal is a great little tang to have inside your tank to help with the cleaning. Insane Reefer says, will Reef Booster Prodebio color up your corals? I've noticed green color in my tricolor acro ever since I started dosing it 2 weeks ago. The Reef Booster is a type of food, so odds are there are certain things in there that will definitely feed your reef. I'm not a big fan of Reef Booster only because it makes my skimmer go bonkers and it takes forever to get it to settle down. And I just don't have the patience for that, so I use it so rarely. I probably use it 2-3 times a year at most. Once I got my saltwater thing going, and I've got all my backup saltwater where I have tons of water available, then I won't mind as much because I can have the skimmer just drain out 15 gallons of whatever is bothering it, and then just put in 15 gallons in my sump and just keep moving on with my life. And that would be fine. But yeah, when I add Reef Booster or when I add Coral Vits, which is their coral additive, I'm sorry, Coral Vits. What do they call it? Yeah, Coral Vits. It's their vitamin additive. I said coral additive. When you add that, it makes my saltwater tank sound like a freshwater tank. It suddenly becomes super crazy, annoyingly loud for me, which bugs me to no end. And I try to ignore it. I try to say, okay, I'm fine with it, but I'm not fine with it. And so what instead I do is I don't use it unless I'm really in the mood. But coloration comes from a lot of things. And having good water parameters and good quality lighting and good flow usually gives you the colors you need. But you're right. Sometimes when we add something new to the tank, something different, maybe it's amino acids, maybe it's reef booster, maybe it's live rock enhance, I don't know. We just suddenly see a change and something's prettier. And we see a new color we never saw before. That does happen. That's part of the fun part of this hobby, that it's not stagnant. There's always something new to discover. Oh yeah, I totally missed that point. Anchor, thanks for bringing that up. So the person asking about the Asterina starfish, and I suggested the harlequin shrimp. Yeah, if you have wrasses, it'll probably eat that shrimp. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. I had 2 harlequin shrimp many years ago when I set up the 280, but I feel like I had some wrasses in there too. And I noticed one day I had no Asterina starfish anymore. I was like, they're gone. And then I noticed like a week later, I had no harlequin shrimp. They're gone. And I was like, oh, and I just assumed that they vanished because I ran out of Asterinas and I wasn't feeding them more starfish legs. However, maybe the wrasses ate them. So maybe that's what took care of it. I have no idea. I didn't even think about that till just this moment. That's a good point. So thank you for bringing that up. Oh no, the mug company was not Cafe Press. The mug company I disdain is called discountmugs.com. Puddle Aquatic says, are you able to create custom acrylic parts if I call and send you an idea of what I'm looking for? Yeah, just send me the information and I'll take a look. Send me the first initial email so I can reply to it, then you can attach any kind of pictures, or you can just email me at sales@milosreef.com and I'll take a look at whatever it is you're trying to show me, because that way I can decide if it's something doable. I had to make something special for a customer, this thing here, and so I had to order this white acrylic. It's being used to be mounted under the tank and then fill it up with a GHL director and monitor or something like that. A couple of things fit in there. So I made this, and I took too long to build it. You know, he wanted it before I went to Dubai. I didn't have time, so I was going to make him 2 of them. And that way he'd have one now and one for maybe a possible other client. And then my router jumped across and took a bite out of the acrylic right there. I was like, well, I can't send him this one now. So I just sent him the original one he ordered. So that's just sitting here. But yeah, sometimes I do special things for customers. And I've got something I'm doing this Monday for another customer. And if it works out and I like the way it came out, I might offer that item on my website as a new add-on for people building their own sumps. Fisher says, any thoughts on a DIY light fixture? Anyone that can do that, more power to them. I have zero desire to build my own light. However, on Reef Addicts, my other website, I have an article by a guy many years ago where he showed us step by step how he made his own light, and it was amazing. And it was LED. And it was so high up, and the tank was, you know, probably this big, and it was about that tall, and it was down low. And the light was way up high, and everything was growing. It was really, really cool. That was back when we really didn't know much about LEDs. It was just starting to take hold, and this guy DIY'd one himself. He just made it. So for me, I'm more about buying something that's available on the market. I mean, think about this. What I have is actually components that I put together, which is not unlike building your own PC. You know, you buy the tower, you buy the power supply, you buy the hard drives, you buy the motherboard, you buy the RAM, and you plug it all together. With my lights, I bought the pendants, I bought the ballasts, I bought the bulbs, and I bought the sockets, and I put all that together. And all the lights in my tank are Reef Bright, but it wasn't like a kit where you get the reflector and the socket and the bulb and the ballast. It wasn't like that. It was, I bought parts from different places, but the bulbs and the ballast and the sockets are all from Reef Bright. The reflectors are from Coral View. Ellen says, are you going to Reef Stock? It's not on my list right now. I've actually been looking ahead to next year. I was kind of hoping next year to travel less, because I traveled so much this year, it's ridiculous. And I think, Matt, you know, when I was doing the math with my best friend a couple days ago, I said, you know what? Even with my desire to travel less, I've got 8 trips planned next year already. And none of those are vacations. They're all things I have to do. So I don't know if Reef Stock's going to happen or not. Okay, Emmanuel gives us some good insight here. Back to Ketomorpha and keeping it alive. This person started using Brightwell's Keto Grow. And now, since using it, this person's having to, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, Emmanuel. That person is trimming their Ketomorpha regularly. So maybe there is something missing, which, like I was saying, it could be iron. Maybe that's what's in that bottle. I don't know. But that's good to know. Thank you very much. Maybe if I had some of that and I had some Ketomorpha, I could do successfully. That would be cool. Yes, Reef Experiment. I was just saying that. I do use metal halides. I use the twin arc bulbs from Reef Right. They are a single-ended or a mogul socket with a 400 watt bulb, and I have 3 400 watt bulbs in the tank. And right now they're all turned on, and it looks like they're all in 20K mode. So the whole tank has got that blue hue to it right now. They run for 7 hours each. Fisher says, any recommendations for corals in low light areas? Softies like low light. Some SPS corals like the Jason Fox jack-o'-lantern, which is a really pretty little, what is it? I'm thinking Favia, but that's probably wrong. I've got one that's getting some light, and the whole part that gets light looks terrible, and the part underneath where it's getting no light, it looks great. So I need to like move it into a shady spot. Some chalices do well in low light. Fungias do well in low light. They're way down on the sand bed, so they do pretty well. What else? Maybe Pagoda Cup, which is LPS. Duncan corals could be up high or down low. They'd probably do well in either. Those are just a few that come to mind. Let's see. I see I'm behind on the questions. Let me see if I can catch up. I hate being 20 minutes behind your question. Thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate that. And welcome to your first live stream. Have you done an episode on dealing with reef pests, not including sickness parasites? I feel like we have, but if we haven't, I will, because that's a good one. But I do feel like we've talked about reef pests before. Trevor says, what are your thoughts on closed loops? Closed loops are a great way to get flow in your tank without having pumps on display. So you're going to have a hole in the aquarium where the water sucks out, goes into a pump, and then you have a couple more holes somewhere else where the water comes back in. The downside is you have a lot more plumbing that you may have to see or deal with. I mean, you've got to run PVC down to the pump and PVC back up. You also have the possibility that if anything fails on the plumbing or the pump itself starts to leak, your tank can drain all the way down to the lowest bulkhead. So there's a risk factor there. But other than that, closed loops are very popular. They're used in all public aquariums. It's very common for them. Some people with bigger tanks do it. I could have done it with mine, except to my paranoia level. I wouldn't allow them to drill any holes in the bottom of my aquarium. And I didn't want any on the back because that's viewable. And I didn't really need any on the end because there's an overflow box, which you can kind of see right there. So it just made no sense to have holes there with more plumbing going out the back. So I have water pushing this direction, and it goes across to that overflow box. And then down low, I've got the Vortec blowing water this way. And I have another Vortec back there that's pushing water to the front. And then there's another Vortec in the very back that also moves water across the back of the reef. So that is all the flow in my tank, and I didn't need a closed loop. But I used to have a closed loop on my 29 gallon, and I loved it. It was really cool. Claudius was talking about the Nero 5. I look at it, there's nothing obvious. I take a toothbrush and I wipe it all down on all edges and I put it back together and it's dead silent. I'll spin it with my finger, it's silent. I hook it up in the water and turn it on, it's silent. And then I almost feel like it's going into some kind of crazy mode, you know, like the app has got something in it, but it's not at the same time every day. Like it doesn't happen at 10 a.m. It was just happening now, and it was like, what, 3:50 when it happened? I'm just like, okay, what the heck? You know, so it's just odd. And I told my tank sitter, I said, hey, while I'm gone, that pump's been acting up. It may make this horrible sound, and all you have to do is unplug it and plug it in, and it's fine. And I asked him after the trip was over, how did it go? He says, that pump never did anything. So for a week, it behaved. So I just feel like something's failing on it. I don't know. I need to reach out to them and see if there's anything they can tell me other than buy another one. But if I have to, I'll buy another one because I like it. Callie asked the question about upgrading to a new tank. Yes, you can't use the old sand. I usually tell people if the sand is 6 months or younger, you can move that over with no issue. But after it's 6 months old, I would definitely remove it and wash it out. But what you can do is before you remove it, you can scoop out a few cups of live sand from the surface of your substrate and put that in a Ziploc bag, set it aside. You can close the bag and have it floating in the tank or float in the new tank kind of a thing. And then put in your new sand that's clean, or rinse out your old sand so all the detritus is gone. Put the clean sand in your new tank, add some salt water to the tank, and then carefully open the Ziploc bag down near the substrate and pour that little pile of live sand on top. And you can spread it down a little bit. Don't try to feather it out completely, but just let there be a mound and let the bacteria work its way in, and the flow will kind of move the sand a little bit on its own anyway. And that stuff can get into your sand and start creating some more life, more bacteria. But that's how you do it. Tyler, if you have one Aptasia, you need one box of F Aptasia. Because it doesn't say F Aptasias, it says F Aptasia. So you need it. I hope you guys get that joke. It's actually a good product because what it does is you put it on top of it. You actually put on like frosting or completely seal it into the rock. And the stuff inside of it, it's caustic. Like someone said earlier, they got a drop on one of the corals and got a little burnt spot. The stuff will stay on top and it'll just kind of like dissolve away the Aptasia. And then a few days later, you break off that little white shell you saw, it crumbles off and goes off. And there won't be Aptasia anymore. So it didn't have a chance to even spread out anywhere. Or, a lot of people say, oh, it releases spores. Well, it can't if it's under a lid of this stuff. So I think that's why people are liking it so much. LJ is asking about using Prodibio, and he's thinking about using Biodigest to solve some bacterial issues that can help deal with cyano and coral issues. And was wondering, should he use Bioptim as well? Well, yes. I mean, they're kind of like a two-part. It's sort of like alkaline and calcium. You use Biodigest and Bioptim in conjunction. One is a cleaner and one is a bacteria that's fueling more into the tank. That's how I understand it. I kind of just trust them. I know I should know more, and some of it I've forgotten because I've been using it since 2011, but I always use them combined. I put one of each in my reef every 15 days. So I do know, I just saw an announcement from Prodibio. They've come out with a newer, more dense Biodigest that is coming to market very soon. So you have something to look forward to. That one, you're going to have to shake it because there's some extra stuff in there that when you look in the vial, it may look like it's settled to one end. So you just shake it up so it looks a little cloudy, and then you pour it into the tank. Roscoe can't get enough phosphates in his tank. I got plenty. How much of my water do you want? Yeah, some people have to dose phosphate. Some people have to dose nitrate. There's actual companies, like Elos sells a bottle of phosphate and a bottle of nitrate, and they're not the only company. And I think Brightwell has it too. And people are dosing because their tanks are so pure with their dry sand and their dry rock. They have nothing in the tank for the stuff to take hold. It's crazy how far the pendulum has swung from where we were. We were begging to get zero nitrate, zero phosphate because you knew you never could do it. And now everyone's doing it. So Yeah, you're going to have to keep dosing it, apparently, until you finally get a continuous reading that's like 0.03 ppm. Rosano says, any tips on transitioning from T5 metal halides to the radions? The ballasts in my original fixture are burning out. Well, if you can't get the ballasts and you don't want to get ballasts from Reef Bright to keep going with what you have and you want to go to radions, you definitely can. Transitioning, maybe... Okay, your metal halides are more than likely 9 inches off the water, maybe even higher. And your radion should be about 10 inches off the water as well. The intensity of the light you can choose, the duration you can choose. You can ramp up and ramp down with a radion. You get some great coral color in the evenings, which I love. And they spread really well over a 2 foot by 2 foot area like a metal halide bulb does. So I guess if you were really concerned about light shock, the best way would be to measure the PAR of what you have now, stick the radion in place and measure the PAR again. But if you can't measure the PAR, if you can only do it by eyeball look, which is very misleading, then the only thing I would suggest is maybe don't run it quite as long with a new light, and because it's a different type of light. It's, you know, the intensity of an LED is pretty sturdy compared to a metal halide. And so I would say that you're going to want to maybe run it 5 hours a day and increase it by 15 minutes once a week until you get to like 7 or 8 hours a day or whatever that number is you're looking for. But that way you can underlight the tank for a while and build up, which is sort of like an acclimation period. Matter of fact, the radion even has an acclimation mode in it to where you can say start at, and you tell it 60%. And then, you know, over the next 14 days, it adds a percent every day until it gets up to nearly 80%. And you can see how you like your tank. I ran my first radion, which was a Gen 2, over the Anemone Cube, and I had it at 75% for years. And then one day on a lark, I said, you know, I'm going to increase that to 80%. I don't know why. I'm just going to do it. And the tank looked so much better. And I was like, all I did was change the percentage 5%. That's crazy. And yeah, did great. And then when I switched from the Gen 2 to the Gen 4, I basically mimicked the schedule and I didn't change anything. And the Gen 4 is the Gen 4 Pro, so it's a more intense one. And I was, yeah. And the Anemone Cube is doing great. It's beautiful. I post pictures once a week on Instagram of that tank. Sean, so he's got a 430 liter tank, which I guess is like 110 gallons or so. He's heating the tank with a 6-watt pump hooked up to a heat exchanger that's connected to his water heater in his house. And that's a very efficient way of heating your tank. And you know what? Terrence is doing that on his tank. Terrence here is in the US. He's one of the salesmen at Neptune Systems. And he was explaining his system with a water heater. And my water heater is right behind the tank. I've never once thought, let me figure out a way to get water from there into my reef tank. But wouldn't that be cool? Maybe I should do it. I don't know. I could. I don't know. I wouldn't have to look at heaters in my sump anymore. I guess I'd look at a coil. I don't know. Interesting. Sean, I'd love to see pictures. If you are not a part of Club Milo's Reef, please join. It's facebook.com/groups/Milo's Reef. And post some pictures of what you've got installed. I would love to see lots of detail and hear more about it. That's very interesting to me. I realize since you're talking liters, you're probably going to be talking about different power usages and different components, but it's a good starting point for others that might be so inclined, especially those with bigger tanks that needs it. Yeah, it's funny. I never really thought about doing it. I was really happy for Terrence. Like, wow, Terrence, that's really cool. I'm really happy for you. Never really thought, hey, I could do that too. So maybe I should consider it. I wonder. $50 sats, is that 50 Saturdays? Says, is no sand not easier to have a low nutrient tank? Or low nutrients and low nitrate? I don't think that sand creates nitrate, but sand can trap detritus. And the more detritus in your system, the more your nutrient level will rise and your nitrates can go up. There is sandbed maintenance you can do, and there is sandbed siphoning that can be done to remove some of that nitrate. With the deep sandbeds that are 4 inches to 6 inches tall, they will denitrify on their own because the lower levels have a low pH level, and so it's anoxic, and it's helping to consume and get rid of nitrate. So there's that. But having no sand, I guess, yes, there would be less nutrients in the tank because there's nothing to trap. You'll still see detritus blowing around. You got to keep siphoning that out on a regular basis. I just don't like the look of a tank with no sandbed. It's just a personal preference of my own. I'm looking for the next question. Roscoe says, any thoughts on Live Rock Enhanced to treat dinos, dinoflagellates? Actually, that was one of the first things I mentioned on this channel when I got Live Rock Enhanced and I used it in my frag system. I watched the little bit of cyano that was starting to appear just completely go away. And I thought, well, that's a bacteria competing a bacteria, so maybe it would also work against dinoflagellates. So I made the suggestion and asked some people to buy some and try it if they had, because I have none. And so I said, can you try it with yours and see if it helps? And some people said it helped. Others said they didn't see a difference at all. I don't know what happened between each person. Like, did each person use it 3 times a week for 4 weeks in a row? Or did they just put it in once or twice and say, I didn't see any change? I don't know. But I have a feeling it can help. Now, will it eradicate it completely? I don't know. I mean, it was just a theory I had. And if I had some dinoflagellates here, I would actually find out for myself. But since I haven't grown any of that stuff in my system in forever, I have no test tank to put it on. So I don't know. Michael says, didn't you get an algae turf scrubber that you were talking about hooking up? Yes, I got it, and I showed it to you guys last week, and it's not hooked up yet. Kurt says, if I wanted to enclose my stand due to children and curious 4-legged critters, would putting viewing panels on the sides be enough ambient light for the fuge, or should I add a light? You should add a light. Oh, let me turn this thing off. Sorry, I didn't mean to leave this on here so long. You should definitely add a light for the refugium. The ambient light will never be enough light for plants to grow. I mean, you would have to have that specific spot getting hammered with sunlight every day, and odds are you don't. So yes, get some kind of a light fixture. Reef Bright makes a really cool one called Luma Light that they come in different lengths. I have an XHO over mine right now. Matter of fact, it's you can see my refugium there. Let me turn off these words so you can actually see. And my light is actually too high right now. I forgot to lower it back down into place. So let me do that right quick. There we go. And so the XHO is the daylight version of the XHO that's on my reef. So my reef uses the blue and I don't know what looks like fuchsia. There's like 2 color chips in there. And this one uses white and yellow, which is that daylight that I prefer. And I've actually thought about maybe taking that light. I was talking to Tulio, and I was thinking about borrowing that light and sticking it up on this tank and lighting the tank with that light just for the live stream and see how it looked. So we got to test that out, because if it works, I'll get a bigger one for the top tank and we'll have a live stream light that doesn't look crazy blue. So it's something that I've been thinking about. Vivid Creative Aquatics is here. He's here. So VCA prints a lot of my 3D stuff that I saw on the website, including flow accelerators, Nero 5 guards, vacuum attachments to clean out your sump. He has the extended knuckles for, or I do, I sell them now. The extended knuckles to make your lock line a little bit longer for their 3D printed nozzles. So yeah, it's nice that he always shows up in our live stream late, but he's always here every week. Josh says the tank's looking great. Any future plans with the tank or any plans of going bigger? And then he says cheers. How dare you, sir? How dare you say cheers after such a horrible suggestion? No, I don't have plans of going bigger. I really like the size I have. It's a lot of work as it is. I don't want to make my life more complicated. Plus, there's not really anywhere else to grow this tank. It's 3 feet wide. I guess the only option would be to go more that direction, make it 4 feet wide. And I don't need that big a tank. I'm happy with what I got. And when I designed this one back in 2010, it was my dream tank. So it's got to fulfill my dreams forever, right? I've also thought, now this is being negative for a minute. When the tank leaked after 13 months and I had to get the livestock out, and then they sent me back my original tank built backwards, which was wrong. And then that was 7 months later when I got it. And then they said, we're going to build you a whole new one. And I was like, okay, good. It ended up taking a total of 18 months for the tank to arrive. And so when I got the tank, that was in 2013. Is that right? Yes, 2013. 11/10/2013. And I thought if this tank leaks, I might just build a tank out of acrylic that's like this tall and just fill it with frags and become a frag seller and not have a reef tank in my living room anymore. I'll just have a frag system with shallower water, less likely for a leak. You know, I was thinking maybe I'll go that route. Thank God I haven't had to do that because I don't want to sell corals. Mike says, I have a BioCube 29 using a hang on the side skimmer and pellet reactor. At what point should I set up a sump? Well, I mean, technically you could set one up right now, but you'd have to have a way for the water to drain out of your BioCube and pump back in. And so, I mean, you need a drain and you need a return. The return can come over the back and in, but your BioCube has a lid, which I believe would interfere with some of the things you're trying to do. Maybe with your next tank. You know, you might be thinking about getting something a little larger, like a 120-gallon tank, and then you have a lot of space underneath for a nice sump with a big skimmer and a return pump and heater and refugium and dosing and all kinds of cool stuff. And the beauty of that is when you finally set up that new tank and all that gear is down below out of sight and inside a cabinet where it's quiet, you'll just have this beautiful display filled with rock and corals and fish and maybe 1 or 2 power heads. But I mean, other than that, it'll look really, really clean and not very occupied by gear. Yusuf, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. I'm almost caught up on the chat, I can tell. At least I think I am. Ray is thinking about fragging his Space Invader, which is a pectina coral. Never tried cutting one of them before. I talked to a friend about that the other day because he cut up a whole bunch. Dwayne has this coral, and he took a hammer and chisel to it, and he broke it. He cut and broke it. And I asked him, why don't you use one of those saws? You know, like the wet saw like I have. I have a bandsaw where you can just press the coral through and cut it. And he was telling me that the heat of the blade as it's spinning around, and I guess even the foulness of the water as it, you know, as you're working with coral, that it kind of burns and infects the sides of the coral so that the frags actually don't do well. And that he's always cut it with a hammer and chisel, and by breaking it suddenly, all his frags live. So rather than using what I would consider the best tool ever, he's actually recommending something that most people would not do, and that's just to break it. So you could use bone cutters, you could use the hammer and chisel method he has. I would have preferred myself to use the wet bandsaw, but I don't have a pectina. It's a beautiful coral. I see it in your profile pic. Gorgeous and super popular right now, and apparently it's selling for a lot of money. So yeah, good luck with your fragging. If that is your colony, it looks like you have several little pieces you could break off and keep the main core happy and healthy to grow out more. Yusuf says, I've got a Gyre 330 on my Red Sea Nano Max. I go with the pulse mode at 10 to 20%. Do you think I need more pumps? I got mixed reef, or I have a mixed reef with mainly LPS and SPS. Well, if you're running it at 10 to 20% and you think there's not enough flow, why not just turn up what you have to a higher number, like 40 or 50%? I was recently just talking with someone about their tank a couple days ago, and I think he mentioned he had his Vortex running at like 5% or something. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know. And I just thought, why don't you put those up to like 50 and see how your tank does? And he's like, okay, I'll do that. I mean, I'm thinking about when we use anything in our tank for flow, we want lots of chaotic flow. We want a lot. I mean, if you have multiple heads and they're all fighting each other, the water's cascading and slamming into itself, and it's really causing a lot of change. When you have a desk fan that's blowing on you, you do have low, medium, and high. But none of you would run that fan at 5%. You would definitely want some air blowing on you. Typically, we want to have enough flow in the tank that everything stays nice and clean. We want to make sure that we're not such a strong flow that we're ripping the tissue off the skeleton, though. I had a gyre sitting on this end of my tank when I was beta testing for CoralView, and I turned it to 100%. I just want to see what it could do. And it was blowing across, and it was hitting the Shadowcaster, which is this coral right here. And you could see the water just churning, and it was just really moving water. It was cool looking. And I left it like that for a couple of days to see what would happen. And the front of the Shadowcaster, all the skin was just looking ruined. I mean, it only took a few days. So it was way too much flow, and I turned it down. So, but 10 to 20% is like nothing to me. I can't imagine running any pump at less than 50%. 50 is where my starting point is, and I go up from there. And most of my stuff's around 65, 75% or higher on my tanks. Danny says, what is the best response if your timer messes up and your lights are on all night? Well, maybe turn them off for a day and a half and get back on schedule. There is the problem where sometimes a timer will mess up and the lights stay on nonstop until you notice. And this happens sometimes to people that go on vacation. Or it happens to people that turn on their lights manually and turn them off every day because they don't use a timer, which a mechanical timer will do it. And a lot of the lights that we buy these days have timers either built in, or the app that we use on our phone to control it has timers that you can select and set it to auto. But if you accidentally leave a tank light on nonstop, especially for a week, number one, it's really hard on the livestock. And number two, the fish, they're not happy. And then number three, you'll start growing algae like no one's business. Your whole tank will become essentially a horrible refugium. So your tank sitter should know the lights have to be off at night. And I mean, if they're coming every single day, they're never going to know it because they always show up during daylight. They wouldn't know that's happening. So again, the benefit of the Wise camera, you could actually check on your tank via webcam at night and just say, okay, good, it's dark, I'm happy. And that way you know everything's okay. But yeah, if your lights were on accidentally all night due to a mechanical issue, probably I would have them off that day and maybe off that night and then restart on the schedule the following day. Hope that helps. Serge says, I got an acro that has polyp extension, and I got them local from Worldwide Corals, and I got one last Wednesday that has no polyp extension. What causes this? So you've got two different acros, and one's got extension and one doesn't. The one you just recently got, you just handled it, you probably dipped it, you probably glued it, you've handled, it's in a new spot. It may not extend those polyps yet. Also, some corals extend polyps more than others. I've got a coral up there under it's right about where my fingertip is, right there. There's a little tiny nub, and it's called a Jason Fox furry pink thing or something like that. And it ain't furry at all in my tank. I mean, it hasn't been furry in a month. I don't know what happened. There's a possibility there's a pest on there irritating the heck out of it, but I haven't seen it. I just look at it and the coral just looks like there's no fur. But it was furry for weeks, if not months, and now it's none. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes they get pissy. Sometimes it's a neighboring coral irritating it. It could be too much flow, not enough flow, too much light, not enough light. I mean, there's a lot of things to take take into factor. You can't say, well, if acro A does this and acro B will do the same. That's not how it works. You could have an acro A that's doing great and acro B dies overnight. And you're just like, what the heck happened? So things happen like that too. Sean says, liters makes my system sound bigger than gallons. Okay. I'll take that challenge. Let me figure out how many ounces my tank has. 7,200 ounces of water. I love that. That's funny. Okay. Buddy says, thoughts on your Clarisy, looking at getting one, but some say the motor is weak. Any issues with your socks are a hassle? Yes, they are. My Clarisy has been no problem at all. I don't know about the motor being weak. I think it may be a matter of how the fabric is threaded through or how the fabric moves on the rolls. Out of the entire time I've been running it, and I think I've been running it for about 5 months now, I've had 2 times where it was beeping, and I didn't even know what the beep was. I'm like, what is that sound? And I was looking at everything I owned. And finally I realized it was the Clarisy, a little tiny, there's a controller on a wire and you push it, and it even has a button to turn the alarm off. And I was like, what the heck was that? Why did it do that? And I hit the advance button and it just rolled forward. I was like, okay, I have no idea why it beeped. And I had someone about a month ago say to me, Mark, how do you stop it from beeping? And I was like, I have no idea. It's only happened twice to me and I turned it off. So I don't know, I don't even know why it beeps. Maybe it's because it's not advancing, but mine was. So I can't explain it. But the one thing I want to tell you, and I will be doing this in the Clarisy review video that is pending, being edited. It's coming too. The one thing I discovered, and I was interested, I didn't expect this. It's trapping the crap inside of it and is rolling up the dirty roll on the side. And I was shocked or stunned or I guess surprised is the best description, that under the Clarisy in my sump there was like this pile of detritus. And I thought, that's really odd. And so, I got the gravel vac thing, the thing from VCA, and I vacuumed out my sump to make it clean again. And a few weeks later there was like this pile of detritus here and here on either side of the stand where the Clarisy is located above. And I think it kind of sheds some stuff through its operation. And I didn't know that would do that. I kind of thought it would catch everything and roll it up out of the water. I haven't seen it like flaking off the roll because the way it rolls the dirty inside. So it's always covering itself with clean on the outside and dirty on the inside, so to speak. But somehow it's shedding some detritus in the sump. So if you're expecting to have a perfectly clean sump under a Clarisy, that won't be the case. But it's going to catch a lot of the stuff. And I'm using the supersize roll on mine. You can actually see it, it's right there. I'm using the supersize roll that's supposed to last a couple of months. And I have another roll ready to go. But it's, I haven't really noticed, I haven't tracked the time like I should have. I mean, maybe, actually I have footage of when I changed it so I can look at the date. And that will tell me when I put the roll on, and I'll know how long this lasted. But other than that, it works great. Like I said, I haven't had a bad experience with it. I just was surprised to see stuff on the sump underneath it because I thought it would catch everything like a filter sock catches everything. You just remove the sock and your sump stays clean. So that's just a little thing you might want to be aware of, but I don't think it's a deal breaker whatsoever. It just didn't catch every last bit and keep it all. I guess it gets most of it and there's a little bit left behind. I'll definitely show a picture of what that looks like under there. It's not horrible. ATF says, what's wrong with selling corals? We need more successful hobbyists doing that. It's work. Don't you think I'm busy enough as it is? I can't even get the videos out I'm promising, and now you want to add coral sales on top of dry goods sales? I don't know. I mean, there will always be a possibility that maybe I'll do it one day. I have had coral vendors many times over the years say, we would like to sell you corals to sell. And I'm like, I don't sell livestock. And they said, but you have a WYSIWYG section on your website. I said, yes. I said, did you look in it? And the guy's like, oh, never mind. Because all it was like some acrylic things that didn't sell, or things that were in my inventory that just needed to move, or it was something that had a defect and I sold it cheaper. That's what you see is what you get section of my website. It's not a place to sell corals. And I've had some people over the years see a picture of something in Critter ID and they'll send me a message. How much for that? I'm like, how much for what? And they said, this thing right here. I said, that's Critter ID. You're looking at identification. That's not for sale. And they're like, oh, never mind. So yeah, I've avoided selling corals like the plague. But I don't know, maybe at some point I'll have to sell corals to pay the bills. I mean, I don't know, but I think my frag tank will have to be doing a lot better if I want to ever pull that off. So there's that. Rosano says, can you dedicate a video one day to leaking tanks? What should we have on hand in case silicone gives up? You know, actually, I think I have 1 or 2 videos that talk about that already. It was basically going to be something under the premise of let's discuss what to do in an emergency, or let's discuss a worst case disaster, or something disaster, emergency, some kind of word like that. And I've talked about things to have. And I mean, yeah, we could have an entire topic on that, but I feel like I've covered it. Not that we can't revisit. I'm not opposed to that. And now that we've done as many live streams as we have, I'm almost to the point where we have to kind of go back to the beginning and kind of re-hit some topics that we've heard already. And hopefully that's okay, because some of you are long-time listeners and you just love to listen no matter what, and some of you are brand new and haven't heard anything yet and don't even realize how much information is on this YouTube channel waiting for you. Right now we're at 177 people are watching, and then, you know, usually the live stream goes out to like 5,000 to 6,000 people, and that's how many people are reached. I might as well mention, please do subscribe to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. You know, that's important, because when I do release those videos, you'll get a notification and you'll get a chance to watch them. But, and you know, likes and comments are also helpful for the channel, because the more activity any video gets on YouTube helps get it more pushed out by YouTube. YouTube kind of makes more of a big deal of it. You know, there's so many controversial videos out there. We're just doing education here. It's not nearly as dynamic and exciting. There's no pranks involved, you know. But at the same time, I think what we're doing is solid. You know, we're discussing real things, and we're going into solutions to problems, and that's the whole point. You know, Milos Reef is answers that work. You know, we want to find ways to make things be even better than they already are, or we want to fix things that have been a problem for a long time, and we want to improve them so the livestock does well. Hey, Reef Keeper, thanks for mentioning that. That is really good to know, because if I had one, that's exactly my approach. I would use the Griffin bandsaw. Elias says, where did you get the giant container of salt, and what brand? The brand is Salinity, and it's made by Aquavitro, which is under the Seachem brand, and I got it from my fish store. So I said, I need a big barrel like you have, and so he ordered it in, and I went down there with my truck and my trailer and a 2-wheel dolly, because the thing's like 500 pounds. It's so heavy. It takes 2 of us to get it loaded, and I leave it on the 2-wheel dolly, like the dolly is like on the floor of the trailer, and then when I get home, I open the trailer and I stand it back up and I roll it into my my garage. And it is actually next to Minion. It's in my way, but it's my salt. So, I mean, you know, I have nowhere else to put it. It's a big barrel. I mean, it's like a 55-gallon barrel. It's big, but made of cardboard. Maybe a little bit smaller than a 55. What size is Spock? I don't know. That big. 12 inches, maybe? I don't know. She's about 3 inches thick, I can tell you that. She's a beast. Yusuf, thank you for following up on that about the gyre while you're running it at 10 to 20%. When you go to 40, there's water on the floor. You might be able to lower it slightly and turn it up, and maybe you won't get water on the floor. But yeah, I would just look at the corals and how they're responding. And if they need more flow, you know, you can add it. If they tolerate it, keep it going. If they're unhappy, you can lower it down a little bit. Jason says, I wonder if you could spray the coral with a bottle of tank water while cutting it. The way the wet saw works, the bandsaw works, it actually goes through 1 inch of water that's inside the base that the saw is built on. And so it's constantly lubricating the blade. Now, the way Dwayne was talking, he was making it sound like not only was it a bacterial infection and crap, but I think the blade got warm and it was like cooking the corals it was cutting through. But I think if you were like let's say you hadn't done anything yet, you just set up the saw, you grabbed whatever it is, a quart of tank water, and you put it into the saw, and then you took the coral out, the pectina, and you cut it. It's all brand new water. There's not any other corals of their guts inside the water, so it's pure. You could probably get away with it. I don't know. I mean, like I said, he felt like his solution was bulletproof and he's happy with it. If I was doing it, I'd probably set up a brand new clean saw and I would cut this coral a couple times and see how it goes. And if it goes well, maybe cut a few more. And he did tell me when he was done with a hammer and chisel that the center part looked hideous because he just attacked it. But he made like 12 frags, which, he sells the corals to help fund his hobby. Elias, when you were asking about the size of Spock, when I got her, she was smaller, maybe about this size, and she was in the 280 gallon. I bought a used setup with a lot of fish, including Spock and the purple tang. And I've had that fish now since 2004, so it's had plenty of time to grow larger. And I didn't buy that fish outright. It came from Live Aquaria, but it was the person that bought that owned the tank I bought it from. I got all the livestock in the tank and the stand and everything all in one sale. And you know what? I wouldn't even get a big one. I would definitely recommend you get a small fish and let it grow in your tank so you can appreciate it and see it change over time, rather than just getting a big fish swimming back and forth. It's kind of boring. Buddy, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate that. I'm going to spend all of that on chocolate. ATF says, any suggestions on how one can set up an 8x10 or 10x12 room for saltwater reef keeping, aquaculture, and selling corals? Well, this room here, I believe, is 12x10 that I built for the reef. And I wanted to have plenty of room to work because I was hoping to have a place with a sink, and I wanted to have a quarantine, and I wanted to have that frag tank, and there was plans for things, but then, the room filled up pretty quickly with the reef itself and the big saltwater container, which is this giant 7-foot tall cylinder. And so I didn't really create as much space as I hoped. But when this tank leaked, I was able to remove everything from that wall over there and put a 215-gallon reef, which is 6 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet, or 2 feet by 30 inches tall, in that room. I never thought there'd be room for another reef tank inside that fish room when I built it. And it worked out in my favor. It was awesome because the livestock sat in that 215 for 18 months waiting for the tank to be replaced. But my presentation that BRS shared a couple years ago was about setting up a fish room for your aquarium, and I went into a lot of detail on that, so that would be worth watching. Or if I ever get around to the series I was talking about in January of 2019, I was thinking about doing a series of videos based on the blogs I wrote in 2010 about the build of this room. And I thought I could just do, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, and we just cover different facets until I caught you guys up on all those blogs that still exist, but most people don't read. And I thought that would be a good content. But I always have great ideas, but I have a lack of time. So that could be something coming in the future. It'd be a year later than I planned, but wouldn't it be cool if I could start that next year and just kind of do it? And to estimate the expense of the room, I can't tell you. I mean, it comes down to what the room already has versus what you have to add to it. Is it a room with concrete floor? Or do you have to, do you have to drill in a drain? Or, is this brand new, nothing exists and you're doing it from the ground up? There's going to be certain construction prices. I think it's somewhere between $4 and $12 a foot, depending on what you're building when you're building a house. And here you're talking about a room, so you're looking at the foundation, you're looking at the walls, the sheetrock, the insulation, the wires, the ceiling, the light fixtures, the circuits, all these different things are all coming into play, plus ventilation, cooling, heating, all these things. So they're all part of it. Let's see. I do want to mention to you guys that my mother is coming to visit next Saturday. and she's going to stay with me for a week. She arrives on Saturday, and she leaves on Saturday. Technically, I might do a live stream on both days, but there's a chance I won't do one on either day. Because the way that her flights land, I feel like I could pick her up at the airport and come home and do a stream. And she probably wouldn't mind. You know, she's awesome. But then the following week, she flies out basically at 2 o'clock, which is when I do the stream, which means I have to have her at the airport probably by around noon, which means I'd be home in time to set up for the next live stream. So I kind of feel like we have 2 more live streams this year to look forward to. But there is a chance they won't happen if something comes up. Or let's say my mom arrives, she's just hungry, and we have to go to lunch. You know, then there won't be a stream. I'll try to update you guys through Facebook and the community tab here on YouTube. The community tab is a way to send out messages that you should get in your inbox and give you a little bit of notice. But it could be a spur-of-the-moment decision. So just giving you a heads up in case that happens. Hey, I guess that's it. And we went too long. It's almost 5 o'clock. I got things to do. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. As I started this live stream, I talked about water testing. It is time to test your water today. Water Test Saturday is a thing. I highly encourage you to find out what everything's going on with your water now. Get that, as I mentioned later on in this broadcast, it's really important that you prepare your tank now so that it's super stable during the holidays. Whether you're traveling or you're at home with guests, you don't want to be farting around with the tank. You want the tank to be doing well. You want it to be pretty. You want everyone to go, ooh and ah, and I love it. And I kind of hope, I mean, we're still, what are we, 10 days from Christmas. So there's still time to tell your loved ones what you want for your tank this year. And maybe that'll be under your tree. That would be really cool. I really appreciate everyone that's been supporting me through my business. And so anyone that goes to MillersReef.com and buys something is entered into a contest. That contest is live right now. It's throughout the end of this month. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to sell 1,000 orders in 2019. And as of this live stream, we made the graphic. It says 26 orders to go, but then somebody during the stream said, make that 25. So maybe it's 24 at this point. I'm just trying to hit that 1,000. And if we hit the 1,000, then the contest is live. And I don't see why we won't make it. So I appreciate anyone that buys something because it helps get us to that number. And then one person that bought something during December will either win the Kimura pump or the Coral View lens clip. So that winner gets to pick which one they want. So thanks, guys. This was our longest stream ever. Andrea is really good about tracking it, and I definitely agree this was the longest one. So let me stop, take a pill, get some more stuff done, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye.